All right, I guess we're gonna get started. We have a cozy environment. I know. I learned from VentureWell. It's the clap once if you can hear me, clap twice if you can hear me. There you go. Everybody's here. I learned that from VentureWell. They're really good, so you can. Well, that's fine. However it works. It's better than continually raising your voice and having and fighting it out that way, especially since Ted's behind us in a different session. So great. So it's going to be it'll be a cozy room for a couple of hours. We're scheduled to be in here between 1 and 4, though I'm not sure we'll make it all the way to 4, but we'll make it as far as the conversation takes us. So. By introduction, I'm Marc Sedam. I'm the Associate Vice Provost for Innovation and New Ventures at the University of New Hampshire. I am myself a FirstGen student, so the topic at hand is something that I think about a lot. In fact, this is the second year of a conversation that we started same time and place and location last year as a continuation of our I-Corps grant. So last year, NSF asked for some supplemental awards on inclusion and diversity in entrepreneurship. And so of the 35 or so universities that applied for those, 8 were awarded supplemental awards. UNH was one of them to cover the topic of FirstGen. And what we found very quickly was that that's a topic that we're all familiar with and nobody knows all that much about it other than that it exists. So last year we spent some time digging into the literature only to find that very little existed. So it really was a conversation that we wanted to open up. Ian will go through some information about the eCenter and UNH specifically in a second. But I think it's something that all of us in higher ed really understand natively, that a first-gen student's approach to college is very different than other students' approaches. And if I could be so direct and bold in my own experience to say, there isn't much of an approach a lot of the time. You kind of come in and say, great, I got in, now what? And so the hope here is to have a little bit of a conversation with both folks who are living this right now and those of us in higher ed who really care about it. Because if your campus is anything like ours, we are at least between 33 and 35% first gen at UNH. And so that means 1 in 3 people have effectively no one in their family that have gone to college. The definition of first gen varies a little bit, some of it, but I think an acceptable, not the accepted definition is somewhat a person for whom no one in their immediate family, parents, siblings, and grandparents have gone to a 4-year school. There is some question about whether 2-year is enough, but that's kind of the definition that we're going to run under. Interestingly enough, one of the other diversity and inclusion grants that went on last year that we continued at Bio was on diversity and inclusion and bio-entrepreneurship. And so we actually finished year 2 of that program just last week at the Bio conference in Boston. And so this week we're continuing year 2 of that supplemental award here with you all. So with that, I'm going to actually hand it to Ian, and we'll do introductions all around, and then we'll start back at the beginning.
So my name is Ian Grant, Director of the Entrepreneurship Center at University of New Hampshire. Been there for about 2.5 years.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Choi from Arizona State University.
I'm Bara Watts from Oberlin College.
Isabelle Monlouis, Georgia State University. Ida Sanchez from St. Francis College.
Hi. I'm George. I'm the CEO of Iron Legion Inc. and head of product design at Just Gimme.
Bernard Tay, CEO of TAP, Teacher Pal, UMass Lowell.
I'm Scott. I'm a chemical engineering junior at UNH.
I'm Michelle Paradise. I'm a junior mechanical engineer.
Yes, including me.
We're so interested in what the students are doing. I'm Kim Sherman. I'm from Westfield State University, which is, about 2 hours from here.
I'm Kevin Snyder. I'm from Penn State New Kensington, which is about 17 miles from Pittsburgh.
Matt Harvey from Stanford University with the Entrepreneurship Center in the School of Engineering.
Awesome. Lisa Noble, Colby College, and entrepreneurship is one of my 3 jobs.
Stephanie Chan, I'm with the Maryland Institute College of Art.
Andy Morris from Texas A&M.
Heather McNeil, Entrepreneurship Center at UNH.
So again, thank you all for being here. And again, you'll notice that there's a wide range, intentionally a wide range of types of universities on this panel because it's going to be interesting to sort of understand the similarities and the differences based upon geography as well as size. So I'm just going to spend a couple minutes talking about that intersection of entrepreneurship and FirstGens at UNH. So Mark did this, but again, sort of the level set, first generation college students defined as parents who have not graduated from a 4-year university, often first in their immediate family to earn a bachelor's degree. And as Mark said, UNH has 30% students. So in UNH, I think it's about 60% are in-state, so UNH students, and the other 40% are out-of-state students that come. So pretty small state, 1.5 million people total population, relatively rural except for a couple of isolated urban areas. So that sort of sets the table of also the types of students sometimes that come there. So this is really small, so I apologize for this, but these are some of the obstacles, and this is actually some of what we got from last year, right? So these are some notes that we got from the FirstGen conference last year. And what are some of those obstacles that FirstGen students have? And so again, this is sort of a level set to see where we have the similarities or differences. So again, having to both work and attend, right? So that actually is not just limited to FirstGen students, but that's an added level for sure to be able to afford an institution, whether it's a state school or private school. And again, that total confusion of not really knowing a minor, a major, career path, all those things that, again, all students coming into most universities have. Even if it's a larger school where they go to a college, whether it's a business school or engineering school or liberal arts or a small liberal arts school that the idea is to come to learn, those are somewhat unknown and accentuated, I think. This again came from last year, so there's embarrassment and shame about their FirstGen status when speaking to non-FirstGen, right? So the fact that we flag it is sometimes could be considered funny, right? So we don't think so. We think that there's nothing wrong with it. We believe that there's actually amazing opportunity to work with FirstGen students for a whole host of reasons, which we can talk about more in the discussion piece. But because I think work ethic, responsibility, a lot of those things that sometimes don't necessarily always translate to all students. And again, not necessarily receiving the support, right? So if you're a 5th generation and you have in your family forever and ever that ability of knowing everybody went to college, there's always this wealth at the Thanksgiving table or otherwise of opinions, and sometimes that's not always a good thing, but there's a wealth of that knowledge to be shared. Difficult adjusting to the academic demands, and again, sort of this notion of the anxiety of the financial piece. What's the impact? Can I really be an entrepreneur because I have this responsibility? My parents have sacrificed. I'm the first one. Maybe I need to go to New York and Wall Street and make money to pay back, and whatever sort of that myriad of which I will call myths, but that definitely factors into what that looks like. So when we look at it at UNH, so we have a couple of different components of how UNH integrates with FirstGen. So we just launched it system-wide. So there's UNH in Durham, which is sort of the larger of the entities, and then 2 smaller schools in Keene State and Plymouth State, and then the community college system as well. So UNH overall launched a thing called the Grant Guarantee. This is the first year, this class coming in. So full-time, first year New Hampshire students receive federal Pell Grants. Do not pay tuition. So it's really identifying those students that it's a complete full ride for them to do. At UNH Keene State, this is a program called I'mFirst.org, which is Strive. Honestly, I didn't know that much about it, but in some early research, it's actually a pretty interesting program. And so we actually will reach out to Keene State to understand how we do that. But I'mFirst is a specific nonprofit group focused on FirstGen and entrepreneurships. On campus, UNH has the Center for Academic Resources called CFAR, and each student is assigned an academic counselor to help them. So we mentioned, like the slide prior to this, we talked about some of those challenges of not necessarily knowing what to do or the process to do that. In addition, there's some peer mentors, so other students on campus who've been there 2, 3, maybe this is their senior year, to act as mentors. It's actually a really close group, and work on study skills. And then there's a Summer Connect program, sort of before, sort of pre-first year, in the summer before and afterwards. And then finally, there's a TRIO program, which is Department of Education funded. UNH is, I think it's 20 years, some long period of time that UNH has had that. So really a lot of help with FAFSA, scholarship research, career major exploration, individual counseling, and again, that's a separate federally funded program that helps. So that's really that's all the groundwork. That's it that exists at UNH.
And if I can hold you there for a second, so the granted guarantee, I mean, how many of your universities have something similar? I think UNC Chapel Hill was the first one to call the Carolina Covenant. It was like 8 years ago. This college should be affordable, so we're going to remove that from it. So have you at least one. So one of the interesting things to show how much I think universities are not aware of the specific challenges of a first-gen student is that, we thought we would do this. We said, okay, this is a good thing to do. It's half the, I can't remember what the I think it's 80% of the federal poverty level or something like that. We'll do it. And immediately got 3 times the number of applicants than we expected. So even when you're identifying it as an issue, something you're really trying to intervene in, even the underestimating how much of an issue this is on any individual campus, we did it right out of the gate. And then we said, oh, well, now what do? We have these, we have this granted guarantee, but we got a response rate that was much more significant. What that tells me is that we were even unaware of how much of that issue of funding was holding people back from coming to UNH itself. And it's only for in-state students. Now we have our particular issues with funding for in-state college, but I think it just is another signal that there's a lot of this stuff that's going on behind the scenes, and as higher ed institutions, it's not that we're tone deaf to it, it's that you don't know what you don't know. And this was the first signal I saw that, wow, the problem is probably even bigger than we think, and there's a reason to try to collect some of the data.
So just talk a little bit about the Entrepreneurship Center, which we call the E-Center, because saying entrepreneurship 100 times a day is a mouthful. So I always say that we're Switzerland. So we're not affiliated with any one college on campus. So there's 5 colleges. There's the College of Life Sciences and Agriculture, Engineering, Business School, Liberal Arts, and Health and Human Services. So there's 5 colleges right on campus. So our goal really is to be Switzerland, to create this neutral place for students to be able to engage with each other. A French lit student rarely is ever going to feel comfortable walking into the engineering school. Oftentimes engineering students don't feel comfortable walking into the business school. So we want to have this place because it only works when we sort of have this interdisciplinary. So that's sort of our footprint and sort of one of our sort of brand promises. Again, sort of hard to see. So we have one program that really starts to focus on at least introducing first-gen students to everything about ideas and innovation and entrepreneurship. We've just finished our 3rd semester of the I2 Passport program. In brief, what it does is as students engage in different programs on campus, so it could be a speaker series, could be a boot camp, it could be design thinking workshop, it could be entering a number of the different sort of business plan or idea competitions, whether they're the entrepreneurship centers or somewhere on campus. Their virtual passport gets stamped, and they have the ability to get up to $25,000 to pay off student loans. So what we did is to say, how do we break through the noise? At UNH, there's 600 different groups on campus. Like, how do you break through that noise to reach students to say, hey, at least try, explore, get some exposure? It's been very successful for us. We have about 400 students each semester that engage in this. And one of the categories that we have is actually, so there's an overall award, and then there's some second place awards, but there's actually a specific award for first-gen students. So limited and dedicated to first-gen students to be able to engage. And what we found is, yes, across the board, some students do it just to be able to have a chance to get money to pay off student loans or tuition, completely valid. More often what we found is that some of those students also came with that idea, and then all of a sudden had some eurekas, like, I didn't think this was as hard. This isn't as hard as I thought it might be, or this is really interesting. And particularly last year's winner completely opened up as a career path in a startup company and several of the business plan competitions. So we know that it works, right? It's still at small scale, so we know that it works, but it's a neat way to at least introduce first-gen students. That being said, I think we still have a ways to go. I think we're very, sort of detail-oriented and data-driven, and some of the feedback is I still don't quite understand this. So we take that to heart, and so as we tweak this for next year, Heather and I are working on how do we start to really, help actually probably stitch that together. So it's not just about having a program, it's actually probably helping walk along. So we'll do that actually with a much larger introduction event in addition to sort of a design thinking bootcamp. Actually, so I went through this. So this is a lot, so we don't have to look at this. This basically is sort of the sheet that talks about the different visa stamp credits that students can get in a variety of categories, again, on campus, off campus, e-center, non-e-center. Some of it's even social media. How do we start to help continue building the brand? It's things like that. Using the makerspace, coming to the co-work space, and things like that. Yes?
So you definitely earn the money toward your student loans, or you're entered into it?
You're entered, it's a pool of money. It's $25,000, and it breaks down roughly $7,500 goes to the winner, and then there's a series of roughly $2,500 prizes after that. So again, $7,500 at UNH. It's at least a half semester worth of tuition that goes to that. And we can spend a time, and I'm talking about this at a session. It's the last session if you really want to stay late here with Holly Butler actually and Tracy from ASU and some other panelists. So and I can talk more about it offline. But this is some of the interesting part about who the data again, who participated. So pretty evenly split as far as year of graduation. The college split was pretty much in line with the population. Business school is a little bit heavier weighted. Engineering was there, but it's pretty even to that. No surprise, a pretty large, you can't see that, but pretty large loan amount. So everybody had at least $5,000, and then I think at least a third of it was $30,000 or more. But this was something that we did not plan on, and this has actually been consistent all 3 semesters, is that we actually get 66% of our women. So UNH is roughly 50-50, so it's actually a disproportionate amount of women that engage. I honestly don't know why. Since I have a son and a daughter who both are in college, my anecdotal data is that she's far more organized, and when it comes to having to think about how am I going to get money to help pay for tuition, she's much more dialed in than my son. So it's I can only cast it upon my own children and their approach. But it's been great, and actually when we see the results, and if I sort of look at the top 10%, it maintains that same split in engagement. So exciting to see. And then again, the FirstGen piece, so 30% who participate, again, mirrors roughly the same percentage as on campus. So we follow that. And we partner with CFAR, if you remember, that was the organization. So they actually send out emails and engage students. So we partner on campus, we're not just an island. Also with financial aid, so both of those are sort of our channels to promote this, to engage that piece. And then we're only 2.5 years old. This has only been around for roughly 1.5 years. It's all about students connecting with students. So we're starting to use the students as ambassadors to be able to help talk about it, both FirstGen and non-FirstGen. So again, we do encourage you to share your own research, FirstGen entrepreneurship. So this is a really long URL, but we'll send this out later. But we do have a page on the eCenter website that is actually a repository. It's something that came out of last year's session. As you find research, so whether it's PhD work, master's work, we're starting to try to figure out, to Mark's point, there isn't a lot out there. Not a lot of universities do a lot, not a lot of business schools that are usually at least half of the entrepreneurship centers, I think, are tied to business schools. It's an opportunity to have a wealth to share. So information that we get from here will be there, and then as you talk to your peers, I know there's sort of a centralized resource and it's open for everyone to use, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. And I think if I can add one last thing on what Ian mentioned, so you speculated on your experience with your 2 kids as to why that is. My own theory is that when you move things from competitive to participatory, you get a different level of engagement. So if you have, again, as a FirstGen, right, if you have imposter syndrome, why am I here? Do they know that I'm not good enough to be here? How do they know, I'll get kicked out if somebody really knows what I know. And you're competing in a competition which is about quality and effort, and I'm a biologist, how could I be in a business plan competition? I think people opt out before they get a chance to get exposure to it. When you make things participatory, it becomes about showing up and engaging, and the results are not the focus. And I think that's one of the reasons. I've heard a version of that from some female engineers, that one of the reasons that they opt out of a lot of the engineering competitions is because it becomes an aggressive environment where everybody's competing with each other on the best ideas, and they're not sure, so they'll opt out, where as a guy, I can say this, when we're not sure, we just keep going. So I do think, and I think that plays down through the FirstGen student too, is if the hurdle is show up and you get points towards this end goal, then it really is just about coming in the room, and what you take away from it is on you. You don't actually have to showcase what you take away from it, so it becomes a personal journey and not a public journey. And I personally think there's something to that. I don't know how we're going to tease this out, but I suspect that there's some reason, because it's the only program on campus that's not specifically targeted towards women that I think has such a high level of female engagement, especially in something like entrepreneurship, which is not normal, not traditional, I should say.
So the other thing I wanted to add too is that both have retired, but we have a president after 11 years who also was a FirstGen student, and our most recent provost was FirstGen student as well. So that understanding, that support from the highest levels also helped. And it's interesting, as we talked on campus, it's a very large percentage of the campus, both faculty and administration, that experience that. And I think through that experience, like we find entrepreneurs are very supportive of entrepreneurship centers. I found that those who have been FirstGen students understand now at whatever level of their career to be able to help and engage, and not necessarily purely entrepreneurship level, but at least overall that FirstGen piece, which is interesting as an opportunity to engage, whether it's alums or administrators, to be able to do that. So I'll pass this over to Bara.
Oh, I'm next? Okay. I have my own thing.
Oh, you already wired.
Okay. You're not speaking?
Not yet.
Oh,
It's
okay.
alphabetical.
Okay. So I am Bara, and hopefully this is up there. There we go. I'm Director of Entrepreneurship at Oberlin College and Conservatory. We are two institutions. We are the Music Conservatory and the Arts and Science Liberal Arts College. They're joined. They're two colleges under one umbrella. I'm head of a department that is called Creativity and Leadership, which oversees all the different types of programming that we have for entrepreneurship. I pursued the information here more from how do I engage first years and non-traditional students in entrepreneurship specifically. I've only been at the college for 1 year. I've only been in academia for 1 year. So some of this has been, and I said that when I got invited, and I said, no problem, you'll give another perspective. But Oberlin is a very different kind of school than what yours in New Hampshire is. We are a small liberal arts college in a little tiny country town an hour outside of Cleveland. There's about 2,900 students, all undergraduate. We have 4- and 5-year programs. Obviously, our Music Conservatory program is probably the most well-known across the country. But our liberal arts programs are particularly strong in our pre-med and our STEM areas. We have a legacy of social justice and environmental stewardship born from our very early roots. We were the first college to admit blacks and the first to admit women into a co-ed setting. And that still resonates quite a bit throughout all the programs in the music and liberal arts. The programs that I oversee at lunch under Creativity and Leadership is an introduction to entrepreneurship, innovation bus trips, innovation talks, entrepreneurship club, startup weekend, and our big anchor program, which is Launch You, which is our boot camp program. When I came in, we only had the Intro to Entrepreneurship and the Launch You program. I've instigated the others just this year. Didn't I? Oh, you got the wrong one in here. Dang. Okay. All right. What I wanted, I had put another slide in here and I had sent it through, so obviously it didn't make it all the way through. We had, in 2017, we won a $1 million award, we at the college, for the Howard Hughes Innovation Medical, you're familiar with it. And it's about inclusion, it's about reaching out to first years and unrepresented, non-traditional students and helping them be more successful in the science and medical fields. And the staff and faculty of the college were invited to join this effort and design various different committees and participate in those committees. And I joined the communications program committee because I very specifically wanted to find how can I reach out to the first year and non-traditional students in the science and STEM fields and attract them to the entrepreneurship programs that we have. So I from that have been mapping out, and actually am the first department in the college to actually be building communication systems across the campus to various different efforts where these students are being engaged. One is the Student Academic Success Department, which is a student counseling and advising program specifically for the first year and non-traditional students. And when I say non-traditional, I'm talking about for the sciences, women, ethnic groups, and so forth that might not traditionally be seen in various science and medical fields. And so I've forged relationships in those departments so that they would communicate the programs that I'm doing and advise their students to explore some of the areas that I'm doing. I've also reached out to a number of the student clubs. There's the Black Scientists Guild, and have gotten them actually very engaged, where they actually have become partners with us in marketing it at various programs out to students that are looking to go into the sciences and so forth. So, and then the Bonner Center is another area that we are very engaged, that I got very engaged with. So I personally developed relationships with key departments so that they became marketing partners with me very actively. I make sure that they're really informed. I then report back which of their students engaged in the programs and what was involved in it, so that they really have a tactile relationship with what their students are doing with me. That's sort of the umbrella of what I am doing in this, in reaching out across the campus. While it is a smaller campus, and there's only 2 colleges there, but it is my first year, and I'm a one-person shop. It's been a lot of work, but it's been very, very rewarding. I want to quickly then take you through some of the programs that we have, and I have to say that we have had a very significant number of students who are FirstGen, first year, and non-traditional in all of our programs. So I think some of the efforts that I've made are in fact seeing results. So our intro to entrepreneurship, we are Switzerland as well. I report to both deans. I am a non-degree, non-major or minor. I'm an elective, but credit-bearing programs. The intro to entrepreneurship is Monday from 7 to 9 at night, right after dinner. So it is a non-sit-down, very participatory program. Some of the things that I was very aware of is some of the students that hold, I forget the term you just used before, where you feel like you're an imposter. Instead, I put the kids into groups. The first class, I make them take the Myers-Briggs. And the goal of that is for everybody to understand and respect that we have different learning abilities and goals and talents, and not everybody has to do everything to be successful as a team. So they put into teams, and they're a company, they name their company, and they have to identify how to improve the college in some way. And go out and do the research on campus, they come back, so we do the whole design thinking, business canvas. It's done in 6 sessions. By the end, they have got a business plan. And the spring program, we had 3 companies, 5 students each, and 2 of those companies, the students are taking them forward on campus. And so I'm now navigating with the campus folks and helping them, and they're doing it all volunteering and taking it forward, which is really exciting for me. And they're across all the disciplines. It's first year through 5th year students, music through sciences. One of the things that I really feel is critical, especially for we have no business program in our school, which is also kind of a why do you have an entrepreneurship program? And I am housed in a rehearsal studio in the music department. And it was started by the dean of the Music Conservatory. Yeah, so it comes from a totally different direction than most any other entrepreneurship program. But I feel very strongly that in order to get students thinking about being entrepreneurs, they have to touch entrepreneurs, and they have to be engaged directly with innovative thinking, and so that they can start understanding how to apply the learning that they have already. These are real type A kids that are really strong at being fed information and spitting it back, but not really good at coloring outside the lines. And so part of my job is really getting them to think outside the lines and start realizing that it's actually a good thing. So the innovation bus trips, I just advertised them. I got students that just showed up from across disciplines, across campus. And I took them to the Cleveland Clinic Innovation Summit, to the Cleveland Sustainability Summit, to meet startup entrepreneurs and incubators and stuff like that. And most of these kids never met each other before and made friends in the bus. And so I reached out, found a bus in the athletic department, and I said, so where's the driver? And they said, there is no driver. I've never driven even a minivan. I'm driving the friggin' bus. But I said, that's what entrepreneurs do, right? So
with or without a license to drive.
Well, with or without. I had to get approved. And so in the spring, I started the innovation talks. In this, I brought 22 different companies into the campus. Using 3 topics: healing mind and body, fertile earth, and powering our future. Again, the idea of let's get students face to face with people who are doing innovation. I kept it really simple. They were literally talks. I put the professionals at tables. I assigned all the students their starting table, and then they had to go in sequence every 15 minutes. They moved to the next table. And they just asked questions. I gave them questions. A lot of them I gave them like little clip cards so that they sort of knew how to ask certain things, but usually they didn't even need it. I would circle around and the conversations were going. And it was everything from marijuana breathalyzers to biotech, orthoscopic things to water remediation. I mean, it was all kinds of really amazing things that people came in and talked. The student body was represented 33 different majors. And I have to say, we partnered with the STEM departments. They reached out and specifically tapped the shoulders of students that were FirstGen or non-traditional and encouraged them to come to the program. And then Marc partnered with our advising programs and with the clubs that serve the underserved populations. And even more important, 2 first-year international students came to me over the Christmas break and said they want to start a entrepreneurship club. And so in January we started it, and they marketed this. They did all the marketing. They put together the posters. They created a whole Snapchat and Instagram video series where they promoted all the different speakers that were coming. So we had this says 105 students actually attended. We had 198 students that signed up. Many of the students came from multiple of the sessions, the 3 different programs. So it really perked up. And the other thing was for me to get faculty engaged. Entrepreneurship in this particular college is a dirty word amongst the faculty. Students have no problem, but the faculty have a problem. So I purposefully tried to start working on the word innovation with them. And then I invited certain faculty to host the event so that I could celebrate them and that they then could be a part of it. It was like literally bribing them to get there almost. But they came and they were like, oh my God, and they built relationships with the professionals now, and now I'm involved in planning out next year with them, which has been really important because I want to build the entrepreneurship program around their academic training. So the boot camp is our big program. This is open to the entire Oberlin community, alumni, students, faculty, parents. Anybody in the Oberlin family is invited to do this. In the fall, they submit their ideas. I have a board who are alumni. They choose the ideas that are invited in. They also fund this, and I work with them to actually raise the funds for this that we give away to the finalists. The boot camp is a 12-hour, 12-day program in January. It's a mini MBA. We take them through a lot of the same stuff you're probably familiar with the business canvas. I brought in 20 professionals who talked about everything from the legal aspects, the marketing, finance, staffing, all of that, and they do exercises and programming all around that. At the end of that, they've got a preliminary pitch. We then partner them. I started our first entrepreneur mentorship program, where these are alumni and parents that were interested in being mentors, and we partnered them up with the companies. We had 21 companies. We had 31 people participating, and so we had the mentors that then worked with them to pitch. And they could choose to pitch or not. Again, this was something we did not, this was not the competition where, everybody had to like make it at the end. They could choose, so there's a first round pitch in February. They continue to be coached by we had a couple of professional speaking coaches as well as business coaches that worked with each of the mentors, each of the companies. Final pitch is in March. We do it on the same weekend as our quarterly board meeting. And we do a dinner with the board so that all of our startups get to know who the board is and vice versa. And from that, my board member, who are specific for LaunchU, they decide how much money they're going to give away from what we raised and to which companies. So we're not saying $10,000 will be given away. This year we gave away $37,000 to 4 ventures. The first place were 2 women who were alumni who have launched a seaweed harvesting and distribution business out of San Francisco. Our second place were 2 students. One is a biology student, the other is a horn musician, and they've got a technology to teach music to students in rural communities through a music conferencing technology. Third place is a young man from Pakistan that is building a technology to help small businesses in Pakistan join the e-commerce world. And the fourth place is a first-year student who is launching a bubble tea business on campus.
So what do you see a difference between the folks who, so you've got lots of different people with lots of different experiences there, but about either do you track the FirstGen experience, or if you could use first year as a proxy for sort of not knowing what's going on, do you see any difference in the kinds of things that people need or want?
Yes, and I apologize again, I had a different pitch that didn't come up here. The next slide I was going to show, which is not going to be on this one, is one of our semifinalists was a young man, Duran. He came from the south side of Chicago. He is a FirstGen. He made it to the finals, but did not make the funding portion of it. However, anybody in the program, we've now set them up with mentors inside the program. Part of the things that, especially in the entrepreneurship side, is they don't have the relationships, and the families don't have the relationships to be able to help them reach beyond the ideation stage and start moving towards the funding and support stages of this. So Oberlin is particularly strong in its alumni relations. And I know that's not always the case in some of the public schools, because I've been involved in some of that in other careers that I've had. But at Oberlin, I've been very pleased, and it's very active and a very passionate group of people. And so Duran, who has a program, he started a meditation and self-help program on campus for other students and for elementary and high school students. He's been teaching in Oberlin proper. He wants to take this out and make it a larger program. And so we are in fact setting him up with coaches and with managers and with, but it's through our alumni network. So what we've done is through the network, helping him build the connections and relationships that he as a FirstGen student might not have because of the family situation.
And did you find that other students didn't need that because they
not
had
as much,
connection?
no.
Okay.
And a lot of them also, a lot of the more mature students, I mean, their families coach them through a lot of that. Okay, now after this, got to talk to Joe and Frank, and his wife is doing it. They've got all those connections at a different level. And it's true for both FirstGen and low income. There may be second gen, or multi-gen student, but if they're a low income, they will also have that because their parent relationships will be at a certain level of, their friends and will not be at higher level decision-making positions. So that, I think, has been one of the most important pieces, is helping them. And I stay very actively engaged. Now, he just graduated this year. But he and I now have a scheduled mentor time where I work with him and I coach him on how to reach out, follow up, do all that kind of thing that he would not have had, I think, if he didn't have that kind of parental relationship. So I'm going to just quickly finish these pieces up here. This is Katie. She's our first year student that started the bubble tea program. And then our launch you. And the Entrepreneurship Club, the students are next year going to be starting a startup weekend. And they had set the goal of reaching out and making it predominantly first-year students. So that as a primary focus of their initiative, which I think is really exciting. That they're first-year students this year, and now they want to bring more first-year students in, which of course will include FirstGens as well. So that's our students for the startup weekend, and that's it. So thank you very much. And the next, who's next alphabetically? Oh, questions, or do you want to? Are we going on, and how do you want to do?
So I actually have a question.
Yes.
What was the impetus behind Oberlin deciding to start a creativity and leadership entrepreneurship program? What was the dean's, where was that coming from? Was it from the alumni? Was it from?
It came from the alumni. A number of years ago, the then president, we have a new president, started a group called the President's Advisory Council of alumni, and they asked them to come up with ideas for improvement. And it turned out that Oberlin actually creates a lot of entrepreneurs. Yeah. The founder's IDEO came out of it. Ben and Jerry's come from Oberlin. There's a lot of people that came out of Oberlin, but it's not identifying itself as an entrepreneurial. So they felt it was very important not only that we had an entrepreneurship program, but that entrepreneurial thinking became an integrated piece cross-campus as our students are going into the innovation economy.
And do the alumni help fund it?
Yes, they run it and they fund it. Yeah. It's unique on campus that way. Yeah.
I had a question that relates just my son attends Oberlin.
Oh, they does, yes. And why is he not in my program?
That's a major question for me, but also it's for the cobbler and her children, right? So I run Career Center in Colby College, so same idea. But it occurs to me one of our challenges at Colby is getting more kids in the arts, performing arts, interested in entrepreneurship, because it's always the hackers and hustlers, never the creatives. And I would think that's not going to be your problem at Oberlin, since you have the con and so many solopreneurs, students who really need to think about, and also lots of focus on social impact as well. Social entrepreneurship, I would imagine, would be a really big item. And so wonder how that folds together with FirstGen too. We have a number of Posse scholars and QuestBridge students at Colby who want to be focused on, taking positive action to helping their communities, and wondering how that plays out at Oberlin too, and what you're doing for that.
I have found a lot of the FirstGen and a lot of the low-income students have an enormous amount of passion about being able to give back. And more so than some of the more legacy students. Legacy students are brought in, they're really on the professional track of lawyers, doctors, they're on that sort of mindset. But a lot of the FirstGen and lower income really have a very strong focus on how do I get back to the community? What do I do in that regard? The arts versus the sciences, right now we're pretty mixed in terms of who's in our system and who's in our program. We don't have a business program, so that it's really we're more of a doing program. It's sort of like, how do I do something to the world is how they see this, versus how do I make a big business that's going to be hugely successful. Now, I do have some of those that are in there that like that, but yes, a significant number of the students that are in our program and are focused on social enterprise have that. And a lot of our international students are very focused on how do I bring back to my culture, like Hassan from Pakistan. I have a young man who's going to do some amazing stuff in Nepal, and a lot of them are looking to bring things back to their native countries.
Yeah, I think one of the issues that pops up now and again is that you keep tying FirstGen and low income together, and I think that's right, because it's an issue of student debt, it's an issue of exposure and access. And so if you're the first person in your family, you all can nod or not nod, but if you're the first person in your family to go to college, the conversation you probably don't want to have with your folks is, oh, by the way, I'm going to try to start my own company and not get a job, right? Right. So it's the internal drive to make sure that investment in you goes back out again is pretty strong. And so saying to your folks, I'm going to quit and I'm going to try to start a company and I'm not going to have a job for a while, they thought they were done with you, right? They finished pay. Right. So I do think over time, and part of the reason that I think we want to collect some of this data is that I do think you'll be able to leap from FirstGen to low income to diversity and inclusion more generally, and find that those issues might be more similar than disparate, and kind of get down to the nut of access. And as Ian talks a lot, it less about, so you asked about the creatives, right? So if you're in STEM, they get it. I'm going to create a thing that's going to do the thing that's going to create the money. But what Ian talks about a lot is the toolbox of how you think, and that the thinking and getting the mental muscle together about how to creatively problem solve that you can apply regardless of whether you're working at a company or thinking about your own idea is more of the focus that I think gets the creatives involved, because they get that thinking process is useful to whatever they do, so it doesn't have to be, firm formation doesn't have to be the goal. The thought process that gets you to, in a particular application, to firm formation is really the goal.
And I'd like to just sort of follow on that. When I was presenting for the first time to the Science Advisory Council, which is all of the department chairs for all the different STEM areas, the head of computer science said, I specifically discouraged my students from going into entrepreneurship. And I said, why? He goes, for that exact reason. He goes, this is an expensive school, and I don't want my kids walking out and saying, Mom and Dad, I'm going to start my own business. It's too risky. And I said, it is risky starting a business. I said, however, the computer science students in particular are going to be at the very front of every company or organization or hospital or anything they go into in innovation. Right. And they have to know how to think like entrepreneurs. And when I first came on, one of the things that I made sure that the board, my LaunchU board, bought in on is that we are that first and foremost it's entrepreneurial thinking. Second, it is startup.
Yeah. I would just say, my goal is never to have people come out of college and start their own business and support themselves entirely from that. To me, it could be a side hustle. It could be something that germinates over 5 years that you do when you're really well prepared to do that. Either you have the networks and the financial backing to be able to put something amazing together.
So Ida's next. Ida.
So my name's Ida Sanchez-Persampieri. I'm an assistant professor as well as director of the Center for Entrepreneurship and director of the Entrepreneurship minor. I am also a FirstGen graduate. Everyone in my near first and second cousins went on to college. My older cousin was the first one to have a master's degree in our family, which was in 1990. I'm also new to academia. I started in the fall at St. Francis, fall of 2016, so I'm entering my third year. Prior to that, I had a 25-year career in the apparel industry, buying, sourcing, product development, and then I also owned a cafe, hence my entrepreneurship. And I also did some entrepreneurial retailing when I was at FIT, my undergraduate. So a little bit about St. Francis. So we were founded in 1858. Yes, we are a Catholic college, although we're definitely lean more towards secularism. Although we do embrace the Franciscan tradition of social justice and social equity, which we sort of interweave within our entrepreneurship classes through social entrepreneurship. We often say St. Francis of Assisi was the first social entrepreneur. We have approximately 2,300 enrolled students. We have a 16-to-1 ratio. Historically, we have been a FirstGen school, working class to middle class. Blue-collar parents with white-collar dreams for their students. Students have historically worked their way through college. Whether you're speaking to an alumni from 1965 or 1975 or 1985, 95, or 2000, you will hear stories about them working 20, 30, or even 40 hours to get through school. So that's not unusual. Currently, our students, by the time they're juniors and seniors, are working 20 to 30 plus hours. We have a number of seniors who are actually working full-time and are desperate for either online courses or courses in the evening. We don't really break it out, and that's something that I've been speaking with my department chair and also with our provost, is that we should really break out what our FirstGen is. I would anecdotally put it at somewhere about 50%. So we're involving demographics in gender, race, and ethnicity. We're this year celebrating the 50th year of allowing women to attend our college. However, as of fall of 2017, we were 59% women, 41% men. Our gender, our race and ethnicity has really evolved from Italian, Irish mainly, although we still have a significant Italian and Irish population, to Latino, Caribbean, American, African Americans, as well as foreign students. Interestingly about our gender issue is that although we're 59% women, very few are entrepreneurs, and even far fewer are in our management department, which is where our entrepreneurship center sits. I think of them as being mainly in what I would categorize as pink collar industries. So they're in education, they're in the nursing programs, but we do reach out to them and explain, well, if you're a teacher, you can certainly have a side hustle of starting up, a tutoring, or if you're a nurse, why not opening up your own healthcare business? Really, the psychographics and motivations have not changed, primarily entrepreneurial. So acting entrepreneurial within a large corporate structure, being located in Brooklyn, we're a stone's throw from Manhattan, from the financial district, and many of our students in general have gone on to the finance industry. We also have many family-run businesses, lots of delis, lots of pizzerias, lots of restaurants, lots of automotive mechanic enterprises. Sorry, I couldn't think of that. But those parents want to see what's going to be for their children. They want that white collar experience. So when you say, no, mom or dad, I want to stay in the pizzeria, like Luigi said to me, I don't really want to finish college, but my mother wants me to finish college. I hate coming here every day. I love working in my grandfather's pizzeria. Well, we're turning him into an entrepreneurship minor because he can go to those classes and he can see how they directly are applying to him. So our first ENT 1001 course, which is, as you can tell, entry to entrepreneurship, was launched in the fall of 2013. The center opened in 2014, and we sit within the management and IT department. And for those of you who have a long life in academia, you know that with academic silos, we have some pushback. We're definitely reaching out in a cross-disciplinary way, and I've been focusing on the low-hanging fruit. So people who I'm friendly with in healthcare, certainly in our communications department, we have filmmakers and photographers, those people who can see I am going to be a solo entrepreneur, as you mentioned, or I'm going to have this side hustle. The minor launched in fall of 2016. We have 5 courses that are 15 credits. ENT, our Intro to Entrepreneurship, was accepted as our general education course, offering in fall of 2017. So that was a real victory for us because we were able to go more cross-discipline because of that. And then in 2018, we had our first students graduate as entrepreneurship minors. We had a total of, I know in some of the larger institutions, this may sound like an insignificant number, but when you only have 380 students, if you have graduating, if you have 11 of those as entrepreneurship minors, it's statistically significant. We have in the pipeline about triple that number for 2019. We sort of reacted by adding some courses and again going interdisciplinary. We accept decision-making in health field, which is a healthcare hackathon course that was developed by a colleague of mine in healthcare management. So that's actually increased our enrollment from the healthcare management minors as entrepreneurship minors. We've added retail entrepreneurship, whether that be brick or mortar or e-commerce. And then July 30th, in a month and a half, we're launching our inaugural eCamp, which is focusing actually on a pipeline of students. So rising juniors, rising seniors, and then incoming freshmen. I'm sorry, rising juniors and seniors in high school. Okay. Reaching out to our high school partners. We've changed some modality again to react to FirstGens who are working significant hours. We've enhanced our online courses with original content and also some clips from our archived guest lectures. So social entrepreneurship will be running for fall of 2018, and then entrepreneurial finance will be running for spring of 19. We're also developing new courses, and we're responding to a need. One is fashion entrepreneurship. I think that actually came about because people were finding out about my background, and students were coming to me. And it's fascinating how many want to build their own brand or build their own fashion brand. Even within disciplines that you would never think were interested in the fashion industry, or a significant, I don't mean to be gender biased, but a significant amount of men interested in launching their own fashion brands. And then franchising. And that's really from students saying, my mom or my dad is a retiring police officer or fireman, and they want to have their next thing. They're talking about opening up a Subway with some friends, or what happens if we open a bar and it's a real hot bar and I want to franchise? How do I do that? And in your intro to entrepreneurship class, that's a week, 3 hours on franchising? That's not enough. So we're developing a franchising course. We're also, it's not up there, I'm also trying to develop a design thinking course and get it into the gen ed so we can really go cross-discipline with that. My focus has been linking curricular, co-curricular, and extracurricular. And these are some of our activities. We sort of do poorly called hackathons. They're really not hackathons. What they are pitchathons. They're setting up showcases. On your right is our healthcare hackathon, and on your right is our healthcare hackathon. On your left is actually a hackathon from my marketing and innovation course that actually took part during our holiday networking party, so they were able to get feedback not only from faculty, but from visiting entrepreneurs and other business people. Each one of these have small awards tied into it. For the hackathon, the max prize was $400. For my class, the max prize was $200. We're also trying to build a learning community and also involving more students in it in a way of extracurricular. But let me just go back a little bit here. Those are students who are not necessarily entrepreneurship students. They're just open to the entire school. Come, vote for your friends, don't vote for your friends, vote for people you don't like because you think they have a great idea. And then we tally it, and that's how they win. So our hackathons are more democratic than our pitch contests. What we're doing here is for my marketing and innovation class, we require every student as a project to build out a crowdfunding page and everything that's involved in that. I was involved with a project, one of my last full-time consulting jobs was actually building one of the most successful Kickstarter projects in fashion into a full-fledged company that was invested by Tony Hsieh and Techstars. So they're building that out. What we're doing in the fall is we're inviting our intro class to vote using Terrier dollars. We're still trying to play around with that to see who has the better project. Who would they actually give their money with? So, and that would be also open to my intro to business class as well. So outside of the traditional entrepreneurship education little group. We're also doing a lot of peer-to-peer extracurricular, meaning we're having students like these gentlemen, like CEO, COO?
CEO and CEO.
Okay. Coming in and speaking about what their successful business is. whether they have a photography business, whether they're in tech, whether they're selling hair extensions, which was this year's winner of our pitch contest. We also have student panel discussions, and then we're also, hopefully for spring of 2019, we're doing a student entrepreneur pop-up shop. And then we also engage a lot of curricular and extracurricular guest lecturers. Each one of our intro to entrepreneurship classes required to have 8 to 10 outside guest lecturers. And then we run a panel series every month.
Could you say that again?
Mm-hmm.
What requires that?
Yeah, our intro to entrepreneurship class, each section that we run requires 8 to 10 unique speakers.
Thank you.
So our impact has been enrollment and engagement, building up that enrollment. Our funding, we've gotten prizes and seed money. Since April of 2017, we've given away $9,300 from funded from a bank and also from 2 of our alumni. We offer mentorship for our pitch contest. So anyone who is in a final in our pitch contest is assigned an alumni or a friend of the center as a mentor. We're also now, hopefully for fall, launching student entrepreneurs in residence. They will be the winners, the 5 winners of our pitch contest who are still enrolled in the college, and we're developing more mentors for them.
So have you gotten any feedback through these programs? Again, I'm going to keep the focus on the FirstGen students about the positive or negative feedback loop about, as you did it the first time, people saying, I really needed more of this, or I needed, because I think folks on the panel are hitting the mentorship question. It's the who can I model myself after? You know, have you gotten any feedback from the students early on that have made you divert what you're doing, and what would that be?
So many of them have no idea about finances. Many of them have no idea how you start a company, even to what a business plan is. Obviously, we're going through that in our intro to entrepreneurship. But many of them may have not taken that class yet, or they're coming to us just with questions. Our pitch contests are open to everyone college-wide, whether or not they're enrolled in our class or any of our programs. What we found is our alumni are the old New York stickball players, right? They're working class, and that's who they want to help. They want to help. They want to give not a hand out. They want to give a hand up. And they'll devote money. They'll devote their time to helping these FirstGen students, much like they felt that they were helped as FirstGen students. Okay, and that's pretty much it. And also student and alumni success stories that we've been featuring in our communications with people.
So, no questions? Thank you. So do you mind if I go rogue for a second, since we're all entrepreneurs and innovators? Okay, so I'm going to turn it back, and because a lot of the things I'm going to share, I think have already either been highlighted, or I have a strong suspicion that my colleague here, Jimmy Choi, was actually doing a better job of explaining some of the parts that so we compared notes a little bit before. So I guess in order to better target what I'm going to say, what I'd love to know is, what is the one question you're trying to answer about FirstGen college students and entrepreneurship, or the one thing that you're sort of looking for that had you pick this panel? So have a better sense about how to target this conversation. Who wants to start?
I would love to start. I see they're averse to risk. They are first generation, and a lot of times from lower income households, and we're in an economically depressed area. So this is maybe a nice thing they do on the side, but they're going to get a job. They want stability, they want a paycheck, they want to pay off student loans. So encouraging them to take risk and to appreciate risk is, I think, our number one challenge. Makes sense. Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
I would think that there's some general concern about funding sources too, because historically underrepresented minorities, who are probably over-indexed on FirstGen, are not getting funded from venture capital. So how can we bootstrap this thing? What if we don't have any wherewithal to bootstrap it? So how do we make a go of this? What's viable for us?
From my perspective, I believe that entrepreneurship, and I'm defining as innovative entrepreneurship, the approach, is something that will be a necessity as we head into the next industrial age. And so, and I became aware of that because of the Entrepreneurial Center that we put in New Kensington. And the companies are coming in and telling me what they want and what they're ready to do. And the only thing that's really holding them back right now is a fear of public backlash when they fully automate their plants. So I went home and had a nightmare about a tidal wave coming. It was really, it was in Industry 4.0. And I live in a town where a lot of the people are first generation, blue collar, Rust Belt. They're not making it now. How are they going to make it in this next age? And a lot of what you're talking about are the things that I'm reading that need to be incorporated into the education of students so they can survive and outrun technology and AI in their last job, not their first. And a particular risk are these first generation students where the parents believe they're coming to our college, they're going to graduate in 4 years, and Alcoa or US Steel is going to pick them up and take care of them for the next 30, 40 years and give them retirement packages, and then they'll live happily ever after. It's just not going to go that way. They're going to have to be entrepreneurial their whole lives. So connecting with that population, I think, is just absolutely critical.
Yeah, thank you. It's really helpful.
I think one of the big issues is creating bandwidth for these students to participate in all these activities, right? If you're working to put yourself through, finding ways to relieve them of the burden of having to work, and get scholarship money or whatever to create the time for them to do these things is the biggest challenge.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes. So we are really at the beginning stages. We have only one course in entrepreneurship. Students take it senior year, often their last semester senior year. It's terrible. Yeah. I'm fairly new to the academic life as well. I had a whole career in human resources. So I kind of look at things through what are the students going to do when they graduate, and this whole kind of notion of entrepreneurial thinking, being innovative is a lot of the impetus for me to figure out how we get something going on campus. There is very little buy-in. I'm going under the premise of kind of we're pretending to build it and they will come. So I'm looking for how do I continue to make the case for the students we have, because lots of first generation, a lot of students come to us because we're one of the cheapest schools you can go to in Massachusetts. Our students work sometimes full-time. We have a lot of students on IEPs, a very large proportion. So also thinking about how do I sell this as a different way for students to engage in their learning process is something else I want to do. So I'm looking for all of the ways to convince everybody, including our president, who thinks we're going to have an entrepreneurship center sometime just because I keep saying it, even though I have no idea. How do I get people to believe it so that we can actually make something happen? So, you know, one entrepreneurial course does not an entrepreneurship program make.
Particularly senior year.
So we actually had that problem when everyone was a senior taking ENT 100, and we went. That's why we decided to go general ed so that we would attract that freshman. I also teach our typical freshman classes, and I always try to push students to take it that next semester. But my other recommendation to you would be to treat yourself like a startup, right? Have yourself treating, you know, I'm sure you're doing that, but.
So Isabelle, before you go on, I actually want to just ask the four of you. So we're the folks who are supposed to be helping. How much of what was just said resonates with you, or how much of that are you saying like, I don't care about that at all? That's not helpful to me. So just like a quick, you know, any kind of discussion that just came out about what our goals are as the folks who are trying to help. But, you know, we kind of, this is what Ian's idea was, like, we don't talk to you first, which is customer discovery. So, you know, so if there's one thing that you heard that you said, yes, that would be awesome, or one thing that you heard that you're like, that doesn't resonate with me at all, just real quick, would love to hear that before we.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Vegas rules. I mean, there's a video, but other than that, Vegas rules.
Well, there's cameras in Vegas too.
There you go.
They are. So, my first forays into entrepreneurship.
You're talking to the microphone.
I'm sorry for anybody who's listening. This is getting hooked on. So for me, my first forays into entrepreneurship, so I'm a first generation student, obviously, and for me, my first forays was being an associate at Techstars, the business accelerator, and I was a part of 2 different business accelerators working with startups, so Techstars Boston, and the new one, Autonomous Technologies. And that's really built my foundational start to get my first executive level position at a startup and also start up my own company. And so I was 20 years old when I started my company that I'm now building out right now, and I've been the head of product at Just Give Me, an app company, just fairly recently. It was born out of networking that I received out of Techstars, and I really feel that building some form of business accelerator program, like a lot of the entrepreneurship centers that have been expressed before, building this form of, what you're building as a student can be real, right? It's not like it's something that's built that's going to be insignificant. It's just, I did it for the grade and then I'm going to move on after that, right? When I went into the Difference Makers program, which is my school's version of the E-Center at UNH, is that this is going to be something real. I'm not going to waste the time that I have, this investment into my personal idea. I'm not going to waste time that that I barely have, right? To create something for fun that I'm just doing for the sake of it, for the money to even go back to college. I'm building something that I can look back upon, 10 years down the line and be really impressed about. And so that was really my experience looking into this, and something that was really born out of working at Techstars. It's like, it's diversity. Diversity was one of the biggest things at Techstars. It's engaging startups. It's the hustle, the working hard, the scrappy nature that is really core to first generation students, right? It's like we don't have a lot of resources. I've had to bootstrap this business myself. I don't think my company is mature enough yet to reach out to angels or any sort of venture funds. So I've had to build this business by myself. So by that nature, I've had to be extremely scrappy. And I think that if I'm able to do that with juggling a bunch of jobs and other stuff, I think that it's really just giving students that perspective that they can put themselves into gear and get this done.
George, did you know that world existed before you did your internships?
Of course.
So you knew about startups and how to, is that what you wanted to do?
So I guess putting this thing back on. So absolutely not. I thought, I actually abhorred the idea of owning my own business before joining Techstars. I actually joined Techstars because I wanted a job, and I thought that startups would be kind of easy to get a job in. But really talking to the various mentors there was really eye-opening in the fact that they had a good idea and they just did it, right? They did what they loved and they got right in there in something that they were proficient in, right? And I think that students, they're kind of leery about the lack of experience, and for justifiable reasons, right? But I think through a lot of mentorship programs that exist nowadays, I think this is just a lot of personal time investment now. And I think students need to know that mentorship-based entrepreneurship is a viable option for young entrepreneurs, especially for low initial capital businesses that can exist.
How do your parents feel about that, or the people?
My parents actually don't know about both my businesses. They don't know.
Vegas rules.
Yep, absolutely. I assume that my parents aren't watching this. They don't actually know. And, I've won a competition at UMass Lowell. I'm the campus-wide difference maker, so the top prize at UMass Lowell. They actually don't know about that. And I don't plan on sharing with them my experience and what I've been working on. For what she thinks right now, I'm still working at Techstars. And, well, to some extent, I still am. But, that's what she thinks. So when, I leave to go to, a meeting with an angel investor, or I go and talk and engage at events like this, she thinks that I'm working at Techstars.
Is that because you think that you want to understand it, or is that because, why are you not?
I don't want them to worry. I think that's it's one less thing for them to think about. I know that it's just going to give them more anxiety that, they're trying to get food on the table. It's hard, it's difficult, right? And that one extra thing for them to think about. I know that I'm probably not going to be able to get a lot of help from them. And so, involving them in the process just feels like a negative to me. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. So that's stealth entrepreneurship?
Yes. Super stealth.
Let's go down and think about something you heard that really does resonate or something that really doesn't resonate.
Okay, so in my case, I'm from Ghana, West Africa, and it's a third world country. We are developing very fast, and I believe one of the best ways for us to excel and make our print on earth is by really investing in entrepreneurship. I'm the first of my family to go to school or go through higher education. My extended family are extremely educated, and we cannot hold proper conversations because they judge you if you're not gaining that level of education. And I need to make my mom proud, so I put it to myself to push myself through education, and I'm trying to go through this entrepreneurship thing. Talking about Africa and where I come from, I have always loved the idea of making life better for people. I mean, if life got better for me, I will be comfortable. I'll live in one house, one bedroom, and one car, so I'll be fine. But then that is not the main goal. I can just get a regular job and I'll be comfortable living. But at the end of the day, I believe in order for me to make life better, I have to be able to have a positive impact on other people. The best way I think I can do that is by getting into entrepreneurship, start a company, something that is prosperous, something that is successful, take it back to where I come from, teach the people how to live and how to make life better for themselves. I believe that is one of the most important things that we need to teach the people around. To hit back on that point that you said, seniors are the only ones that get exposed to entrepreneurship classes. I have spoken to a lot of people who took entrepreneurship classes in my school, UMass Lowell, and unfortunately that is very true, and it hurts me that they feel that way. They take the entrepreneurship classes as an escape class. They need something simple, they look for that class and just go through. They don't even care for it. They don't think of the possibilities and how they can make use of that opportunity, and I think it's something that we should really focus on, and from that we might be able to make a better difference.
Well, contrary to popular belief, or what it seems anyway, from my point of view, is that I've always had all the support in the world from my parents, whatever I wanted to be. They always told me when I was growing up that if I wanted to be a garbage man, they would help me become the best garbage man ever. So, the whole thing with me is that it's never really been a lack of support thing or a lack of time. It's always ended up being a lack of an idea or something that I really wanted to get behind. So the thing that I've really struggled with is trying to find something that people need or that people want. Growing up, I started working at 14 at Market Basket, and 50 years ago, Market Basket was 2 stores in Tewksbury, and now it's 100 stores in the entire New England area.
So for those who don't know, Market Basket is a grocery store.
Yeah. Then I ended up working in a company in Dover called Euroseal, which was an upstart company 25 years ago, and also Adhesive Innovations. They create polyurethanes and work hand in hand with AT&T and companies like that with cable development, cable management, and basically cable repairs. But again, 25 years ago, they were a company that didn't exist, and now they're a multi-million-dollar company based out of Dover in a textile mill. And now I'm working out of Rye, New Hampshire for a mosquito spraying company, which again, I never thought that I would be a pesticide sprayer, but there's a need for it, there's a want for it, and people obviously will pay for it. So the hardest thing for me was never really finding the time to do something or finding the support to do something, because I know I had both of those. It was just finding an idea that I would want to actually get behind and want to put every ounce of effort that I have into it, which again, it's why I'm going to college, is because if I wanted to be a garbage man, I would have been a garbage man, but I wanted to be, I wanted to be an engineer. So when I told my parents that, they said, okay, but you have to pour every ounce of your life into it, and you have to want it. It's on me. At the end of the day, all the loans, they're coming back to me. I'm paying for my way through college. So whatever I end up doing, I have to really want to do it, because if I don't, then I'm going to be stuck with $120,000 to have to pay off. And, it wouldn't have mattered. If I wanted to be an art major, I would have been an art major, and it wouldn't have mattered about money, and it really doesn't matter about money. It just matters that at the end of the day, I'm doing what I want to do, and I'm doing what I what I think will make a difference in my life.
One of the things we actually advocate at UNH too is actually on that same theme, which is not everyone has the idea, but there's a whole career of the number 5 person in a startup company. So having that passion, and trust me, you are just as much an entrepreneur as the number 5 person in a startup company as you are as the number 1. So it's a little bit broadening that path that says it isn't just about having the idea. In fact, I find students think too big. Like we have to be the next Facebook. That's right. I would say, well, if you actually understand really how Facebook started, which is just comparing, sadly enough, one photo versus another, like it didn't start as what it is today. So a lot of it is you don't have to have the idea. So it lowers that pressure, perceived pressure, to say it's okay. It's just that thought of contributing and being a problem solver and engaging early stage. So whether it's, is it Mosquito Squad? Who do you work for? Okay.
Well, one of the things I think UNH has that's really cool too is that idea board that we have posted outside the offices, and it's people that have an idea but they don't have the means to do it. You know, you have an art major that wants to create an app, they don't really know anything about coding, so they put the idea on a board and they say, I need somebody that knows how to code. Then somebody can join up with them and say, hey, like I know how to code, I think your idea is really cool, why don't we join up together and make this happen?
A bit of a digital version of that at Colby, but one of the problems we have is the kids with tech always want to pursue their own idea, and they don't want to be drafted into just like, we have lots of non-coders too who have ideas, but we need to find the tech talent, and there's sometimes a disconnect between the two. So we've been trying to do like co-founder speed dating, so we can bring people together with like ideas, you know, as a way of getting them to, you know, so live and in person, people pitch their ideas, and everyone in the room talks about what skills they could bring to the enterprise, and hopefully find some matches that way. But it's clunky in early days, so I'd love to hear about what's working for you.
It's definitely difficult too, because you see that stigma that kind of comes out of it, is that like when you're in a college of engineering and physical sciences, or you're in a tech kind of a college, then when you're told that you need to become an entrepreneur, you decide to become an entrepreneur, then people always think like, oh, it has to be my idea, I have to come up with it, figure it out, start to finish, 100% it's mine. Yeah. And at the end of the day, it more or less doesn't really matter how you got to the finish line. It just matters that when you jumped on, that you put everything you had into it to make it your own and make it like something that everybody would need or want.
Hi, so I have a different perspective, as of course, being the only female over here too. I come from middle of nowhere, New Hampshire. I mean, there's a lot of middle of nowheres, but I'm in a location where they're like, oh, you're from Mass, and I'm like, no, I am literally the line of New Hampshire. And my entire life, I grew up with guys telling me, oh, you're a wife, you make food, you do this, you do this, you do this. I was shut down many times in high school. College does not shut me down. My entrepreneurship was in high school, and that's how I decided in college I wanted to be an engineer instead. My junior year of high school, I was like, I want to do something, and they're like, well, you can be a construction worker, and I was like, no, that's not happening. So being a girl, they were like, oh, you can go do this, you can go do this, and I was like, I don't want to take care of dogs right now, I don't want to go be a chef, I want to do something. So I started at my high school an accounting internship kind of feel, where I got to be in an automotive class and I got to do the books for it. I talked to the parts we got, I did all that kind of stuff. I basically became the intern, and I think my title ended up turning into like administrative aid to the automotive program. And I started that, and so far only girls have done it. And you don't get your own office, but the teacher doesn't use his office, so you count it as yours. But going into college, I knew how much entrepreneurship and like the business side of things was important. I grew up with an older sister who was 8 years older than me, but she was business. I grew up with a 2.5-year-old sister who was a baking and pastry major. And I was like, I want to do something different. That's not what I want to do. And while I was in college and still in college, my mom decided to go to college. My entire life she's been sick. So I grew up with my mom being on the floor, being not able to do stuff, and it was rough, but she just graduated. And
you can show your mom this video now.
I'm totally showing my mom this video. But but I was the opposite of everyone, which is the cool part. My parents weren't proud of me. I was proud of my parents. The entire high school career into 2 years into college, I was rooting for my mom to finish. And I was like, Mom, you can do it, do this, do this, do this. She graduated with every honors possible. And now I have to do that, which is the rough part. She's like, no, you gotta go do this, you gotta do this. And that forced me to go out and do stuff because, again, going to college, mechanical engineers, there's not many girls. And on top of that, after freshman year, more drop out. And it's really rough because once you find a few group of girls, you just cling together, which is not what I want. I want a group that's everyone together. And so I've made groups with friends. I've started to be a mentor at our e-center. I've started to bring people to different locations. And that's what I want to do. I want people to know that you're not just an engineer. You can be something else. And so when I go to the makerspace and I'm mentoring or I'm doing my University Innovation Fellows, I bring people who aren't like stereotypically there. I'm not like, do this, do this, do this. I'm like, do what you want. So when you guys are like, oh yeah, we have people from all these different colleges going, I'm like, I want that. I don't want to go into UNH and hear an older engineer go, yeah, they're business majors. Like, we have way harder work. No, we have equal work. They have a different major. So you need to like go talk to them, ask them what makes them happy. Like, we have enough. We have cool stuff that we do. They want to hear it. We want to hear theirs. And then you start a bond, which is amazing once you do it. But if you don't get into it, you're trapped. You're trapped with just an engineer major.
Michelle, did you mention you're in the University Innovation Fellows program?
I have a question because something that we've been playing around with was like concurrent gen. So like when you're saying your mom is in college, right? How does that impact you more so? I know you're saying you were proud of her, but what about your friends? Do they have people who are also like their parents are also? Because we're seeing that.
My friends are actually all currently. I mean, I have Scott, who's my friend, and he has this kind of the same boat as me. But a lot of my friends actually have parents who are doing like unbelievable things. I have friends who are pilots, dads. I have parents who have lawyers, and then there's parents who are like all these cool things. And then when I bring up my things, they're more proud of me. They're like, your parents, they're doing this, and like you're still going after it. And I'm like, of course I am. Like, my parents support me. I find that more parents that are like at home majority of the time. Like right now, my mom is looking for a job, but she's a paraeducator at the high school I went to. So she was home during the summer for me. So when I went home for the summer, it wasn't like school ended. She taught me the next year's stuff because she learned it, because she was a paraeducator. But they have the same drive as me, which is great, but I have that a little extra push because I want to make something better of what my parents didn't have.
So follow that.
I was going to say, I don't think you can follow that, but apparently George wants to say something. So I'm going to let George follow that.
And just thinking about some things from the previous presentation. So which one of you talked about the student entrepreneurship in residence program? Was that you? Yeah, something that you're launching. So that's actually something that I've been trying to get at UMass Lowell. So one of the things that I think was great at Techstars was seeing the entrepreneurs in residence at Techstars. They get paid literally to do their business at Techstars, right? Which is like an awesome deal. And I think that, for a lot of students, and especially for me, when I was a freshman coming in as a computer science student, I was a tech major, I was very dismissive of doing anything in entrepreneurship, running a business, as I said before. I really just didn't care, especially around the difference makers at my school. I thought it was cheesy, corny. Yeah, sure, I'll make a difference, whatever, you know? But being able to see some form of validation that someone whom, you know, just like me, can do it, you know, and is spending the time to be able to be available, be accessible, able to be there as like a mentor, you know, talk people through a business idea, you know, not to, you know, blow steam, but, you know, just being able to work people through into creating a viable business and seeing that in every business idea, there's always a viable path. I think that's something that is really important and would really help, you know, bolster a very new program in any way. And I think that's amazing.
So how helpful would it be if you were to be introduced to, even if they weren't going to invest in your company, angel investors, just to pitch in front of real angels, even if maybe their focus wasn't your area?
To be honest, I actually don't usually pitch to angels in my investor at this point. right now we're pre-launch in one of my companies, so I actually don't talk to anybody in my related vertical because I think
pattern here, you know.
Yeah, as we say. What's that?
So not talking. We'll keep it
Yeah, not talking to people. I'm always like, I need to be 100% ready before I pull the curtains back. You know, it's like beautiful reveal and not this crazy lump that's going on behind the scenes. But to me, I find every form of mentorship important, right? Every single piece of criticism, every single thing, the harsher the criticism, the better, in my opinion, you know? Like, I know that those are the people who really want to see my business succeed, and there's never a mentor who's like, you know, trying to do something to your detriment. At least I've never faced that. You can definitely probably tell if someone's, you know, saying something to your detriment, but any form of advice is good advice, in my opinion. Even if they're not in your, you know, I feel like someone speaking in your, an angel investor in your vertical is like gravy on top, right? It's even better. But, you know, even if they're not related, it's just their experience and being able to impart that experience, that's the most important part.
I have a question for the folks here, if I can. You're all first-year students, and you all have very different sort of perspectives on it. When you first came into college and you were dealing as FirstGen, I meant. When you first came into college, and what attracted you to entrepreneurship? And obviously, George, you have yet to even tell your parents. So, what attracted you? What was hard about it? And why are you still pursuing it?
I think everyone knows for me it's just Techstars. I wish every student could be able to go through a Techstars-like program, but you know, my result is not indicative of the rest of them.
So the thing that attracted me the most was that, you know, growing up, my mom has run her own business since she was like 22 years old, maybe even younger than that. So she worked first in Exeter, and then she worked in my basement for like the first 12 years of my life, just running her own business. And then recently she's ventured out and she's expanded, and she rents a place out of just on the Epping line in Brentwood, New Hampshire. And you know, just for the last few years, it's been every single day, it's been her as the breadwinner trying to find how can I make more money. I mean, every morning she wakes up and she says, how can I make $20 more today than I did yesterday? Just trying to figure out how do you expand, how do you do better, how do you make more? And it's been pretty admirable to watch. You know, she's an electrologist, so it started off with her in our basement seeing one person a week for $15 a week. And then now it's her, a massage therapist, 3 hairdressers, an esthetician, all working under her. And just to have seen what she's done, I mean, every single week, it's week in, week out, how do I do better? How do I expand? How do I be the best that I can be? And it's admirable to watch, especially when, you know, every week I'm calling up with some kind of new dilemma in my life, trying to, you know, add more onto her plate. And, you know, the whole thing that I just see every week with entrepreneurship, it makes it that much cooler to me that, you know, my entire life she's made her own hours, she's done whatever she had to do. I mean, every single day she works 12 hours a day thinking nonstop about, again, how do I make it better? So the whole draw to entrepreneurship for me is that she's made it her own. You know, she started off with nothing and she's made it into this wonderful thing that supported her family for years and years and years, and will continue to support her family for years and years and years.
Scott, by the way, I think that's such an important point, that not all startups are created equal, right? Not all entrepreneurship looks like scalable technology investors where you need, you know, venture capitalists from New York or Silicon Valley, or not everybody's going to be doing the pitch competition. And as a matter of fact, the majority of what we see as small businesses is Main Street businesses, right? So I do think that's an important aspect to this, is that not teaching towards the idea that everything's going to look like a Facebook. And that's a critical thing, because the modeling that's happening, and one of the things we see at ASU as a lot of what people call necessity entrepreneurship. There is very little adversity towards the idea of becoming an entrepreneur, because you have generations of people who have done that. The thing that we try to help with is how to scale the businesses, how to legitimize businesses, how to tap into better sources of funding, how to, you know, better sources of revenue. So I think that's a critically important point. It's that not all entrepreneurship looks the same. And, you know, even the idea of being for-profit versus a social venture versus, you know, a B Corp, there's so many different types. And that's one of the things that we try to do when we get to it. We'll talk a little bit about the diversity of the types of businesses, the types of entrepreneurs, the idea of creating value in all different forms.
And it is important to note, obviously, since I'm a first generation student, she never stepped foot in college for a single day in her life. So at 22 years old, she decided, I'm going to start my own business, and she just went off with it from there and decided that this was just what she wanted to do, it's what she was going to do, and it's what she's done. So it's, like I said, it's admirable.
I would just add to Jimmy's point, we have in our Entrepreneurship Center a wall of alumni logos. It's about 600 logos, and it starts with IDEX, which is a publicly traded $12 billion cap company. But it has yoga studios, used car logos. It's to show that it's the universe and the DNA of UNH. Like, it doesn't make any difference. It doesn't make a difference at the E-Center if someone wants to do a single person business or they have great ambitions to use whatever technology comes out of UNH. So we may mentor that, and I think it's a really important distinction to make for students, is not to put that pressure that it has to be a technology startup, because that's not the reality.
That's exactly right.
So
this is actually.
Yeah, I was going to say, so you asked us to go rogue. You said you wanted to go rogue, and then we did. So what I'd like to do, even though the conversation is starting to warm up, is just out of respect for people's bladders. Let's take a 5-minute bio break. Run out, come back. We will start talking in about 5 minutes.
Bon après-midi, mon nom c'est Isabelle Monlouis et je vais présenter aujourd'hui. Je disais bon après-midi, je m'appelle Isabelle Monlouis et je vais parler de notre programme de création d'entreprise à l'Université de Georgia State. See, that works. So I was actually testing. This is actually what I do with my students when I'm trying to catch your attention. I start shifting languages, but then I have to be careful that it only works if it's a language I don't speak. Otherwise, they just continue to process in the other language and they keep talking. So I wanted to see if it would work. So lovely. All right. Yes.
What did you say?
I said exactly what I'm going to say now, which is my name is Isabelle Monlouis, and I will share about our Entrepreneurship Innovation Institute, or our programs in entrepreneurship at Georgia State University. So it wasn't very sexy, it was just a different language. All right, so I think I could have actually introduced myself differently. I could have said, hi, my name is Isabelle Monlouis, and I was a first-generation college student. But I guess in this room, there's a lot of us. So anybody else is a first-generation college student? Yeah, quite a few of us in that room. And you know what's amazing is I don't know that I really consciously identified myself as a first-generation college student until I actually started to prepare this presentation. I had a lot of other identities that I claimed, right? I was a foreign student long before I became a first-generation immigrant, long before and so, but then when I thought about it, and I had a different experience because my family was in a different country, and so they weren't with me on that journey to being a first-generation college student. But when I think about it, I found so many similarities that it really became fascinating. And so, but I didn't want to assume that my path was typical. And in fact, when I look back, I was naive, but lucky, which is a surprisingly powerful combination, but I don't know that we can ask our students to rely upon that. So I tried to talk to some of them. And those are some of our first-gen students at Georgia State. So we did exactly what we did today, and we listened. And we initially offered a first entrepreneurship class, and here's what they said. They said, wow, that class changed my life. They said, that was a real class. So at first you go, well, what are you trying to say about the other classes? But I think what they're trying to express is that it was tangible, it was relevant, it was practical, and they said, I feel like I've learned something I can use, and I can use it now. And what was amazing is when they began to talk about, what they began to say is, well, do you have more? Can we make it a minor? Can we make it a major? And they said, well, I have this idea that maybe I think I can use and do something with this. And all of a sudden we realized that we had given them permission, that they could make an impact. They didn't have to wait till they grew up to make an impact. And more importantly, they realized that they could do it on their own terms. Or if I translate in sort of how I have to speak sometimes to my students, it's do you and get paid for it. And so they really sort of resonated. But what was really interesting is that this is what they had in common, especially, and by the way, all the students who are featured in this are actually first-gen students at Georgia State, entrepreneurship first-gen students. But what was interesting is that they was very, very diverse. I think this is something that we just heard from our panel here. Extremely diverse. So Robert is a first-generation college student. He actually comes from a small town in Alabama, and he was a psych major. And he took this one entrepreneurship class, and he said, that's it. I want more. He became an entrepreneurship minor, and he took every single entrepreneurship class that we had, and in fact, refused to leave the entrepreneurship ecosystem and decided to go to get an MBA with a concentrated entrepreneurship so he could stay around. And he's actually, we all have that one student team or that one student who goes to every single competition, like the professional. He's ours, right? He's become much more polished, and he's actually launching a tech-based business, which is really interesting because coming back from his background, one of the things when people start talking about funding and they talk about the friends and family round, he laughs. And he tells us, I'm the richest member of my family on both sides, and I'm a broke college student. So clearly not an approach for him to earn money. And this is why we've gotten sort of creative and actually literally curating competition so that he can win competition money to sort of support and fund his beta. And that's what we're doing. And on the other path, we actually have Hafi. And Hafi is actually she's from Africa. And she actually came for her master's in hospitality. And so she did not take our 4-degree path. She took our co-curricular path. We had what we call a U-Venture Challenge. We have a very prominent social innovator in Atlanta who actually had created this program which actually helps provide housing for refugees. But the way in which she does it is incredible because the value that's created also helps stabilize and increase the value of the ranking of the schools. And so we actually had this university-wide challenge where students were challenged to come in together as multidisciplinary teams and try to increase not just social benefits, but economic benefits so that she could attract more investors and scale the project. And so Hafi could actually connect because at some point she also had to leave her home country because of fear for political safety and to actually go to another country. And so she could relate to the plight of the refugees, but she also thought that she could contribute from a different perspective. She actually is, in many ways, a lifelong entrepreneur. I mean, her mother used to work for an airline company. So she was that kid who traveled a lot when she was young and found out that in the country where she lived at the time, which was the Ivory Coast, it was really hard to get Pokemon cards. And so she actually would buy them in those other places where you could travel, and then she would actually sell them. So by the time she finished high school, she didn't need any pocket money from her parents anymore. She also had a passion for photography, so she used her Pokemon money to buy a camera. She taught herself how to improve pictures and digitally enhance them, and she started to have sort of a business, again, selling photographs. And online, she actually had the following of, several, tens of thousands of followers on her social media pages. But she wasn't just that. She was also the kid who became Miss Mathematics, Ivory Coast, 2006. And she also was the kid who came up, this was a runner-up in some kind of, national IT competition. And it was important to her because in her country, typically those are fields that are reserved for men. And she was determined to show that she too could do it. And so she traveled and she put all of those passions together. Also because her father actually owned several sort of, he did some catering and he owned some hotels. And she put this passion together, and her commitment was to go back to Africa, the Ivory Coast and a couple other countries neighboring. And she was going to use her talents to actually help put a lot of those small companies, a lot of those small hotels on the map, helping them develop a social presence and helping them actually connect directly to potential travelers. So that, because again, some of the sites that were currently happening were taking pretty much 50-60% of the money, and she felt she could create a more cost-effective solution. It hasn't quite worked out the way she planned. It's been a little harder than she thought to actually start this business, and so she still currently freelances. And another place that's they're very different. When I asked Robert, and I said, "What did your family think about you becoming an entrepreneur?" And he goes, "They've always supported me 100%. I said, "Well, they're concerned about you not getting that return on investment on your undergrad and then your master's degree?" And he goes, "Absolutely, always 100% supported." And yet Hafi tells me that her mother is the first one who said, "You need to get out of the house and get yourself a real job." And so, which is a much more common experience of, no, get yourself a real job. So I think the first take I wanted to make is that our first generation entrepreneurs, student entrepreneurs, are actually an extremely diverse group. And their stories are perhaps as diverse as they are. So the question is, how do we serve them at scale? And the first thing they told us is, give it to us in the form of degrees. See, they already have jobs, sometimes 2 jobs, which makes it really, really hard to actually involve them in co-curricular, extracurricular activities. And so where we have them is for degree. In fact, this is what they're paying for. And so that was a request. And so we actually, our entrepreneurship initially started in 2015, and we started over again this minor and a couple courses. We also have degrees in interdisciplinary studies. So we are built, even though we are below the Robinson School of Business, we actually have built relationships with other colleges, and we actually have degrees that we offer in concert. So again, one is in media entrepreneurship and the other one in social entrepreneurship, and I'll talk more about why that matters. The Institute actually formally was approved in 2016, and basically what that means is we're less than 3 years old. I mean, this is an emerging program. And even though it's an emerging program, we still have some modest beginnings. Because as I said, since our students don't have family money, we curate competitions to help them win what they need to build. And so a couple, again, modest beginnings. So again, we have, actually last month, Christian, who is the second person on the right, the bottom actually, won $50,000 at the FinTech conference in Atlanta. His business is called Coins. And the idea is, his commitment is to help college students pay back their student loans, something that they can intimately relate to. And he thinks it should be automatic. So the idea is every single time you make a purchase, it gets rounded up, and that roundup goes automatically to paying back your student loans, right? And so it's been getting quite a bit of traction. It's quite popular, as you can imagine. Down below, it's Robert again, and it's again, it was a small competition, $2,500, but he actually wants to change the way the world makes music. Before he was an entrepreneurship college student, he was an aspiring artist, and he found that they spent more time negotiating, scheduling, and talking rather than actually recording music, so much time traveling. And he thought, well, what would be possible if we could cut out the travel time? If we could use technology to allow people to record real time from the comfort of their home with the same level of quality. Over time, he actually added a couple of the revenue streams. We could do post-production for them and could create a marketplace where they could actually get revenues from using their tracks. And on top, it's actually Kenneth. And Kenneth is wild. So yes, this is Steve Harvey. So he won $20,000 on Thunderdome. But the idea is, what Kenneth was concerned about is, when he began to work, he had to have all those dress shirts. He had jobs in sales. And those are expensive to dry clean, and they get dirty really quickly. And he was really annoyed with the dirty ring around the collar. So, right? There you go. So his idea was, what can we do so I can not only extend the wearable life of a shirt, because then you have to replace them, but I can also extend the cleanability, so I don't have to have so many dry cleaning bills. And so there came Clean Collar. And Clean Collar is actually made of a medical grade silicone product, which is actually apparently very comfortable to wear. It's also transparent, so it actually shows the color of whatever you're wearing. And he thought, okay, that's something that adds real value, solves a problem that I have, but hopefully makes it easier for others just like me to dress professionally on a budget. So this is Kenneth. So those are a few of our success stories, and I just want to say that with our modest beginnings, because again, this is not that we've raised several $1 million to launch something, right? We're talking, a few thousands here and there. We're getting momentum. So 3 years into it, we have almost 700 students that we have taught in our formal classes, 75 students in the minor, 171 seeking a degree, and that includes of all programs combined, minors, majors. And we've hosted over 30 events, because of course we do a lot of co-curricular programming as well. And we've incubated seven teams, including, of course, Robert, which I mentioned, has been our first at everything. He sort of tested for us and then let us know how we're doing. Okay. So how did we do this? Well, let me just confess. The reason we have those numbers, even though we're only 3 years old, is twofold. The first one is we have 51,000 students at Georgia State. So if you look in terms of percentages, maybe it's not as impressive as it looks, okay? But it's also because we're standing on the shoulders of giants. So 10 years ago, President Becker, the president of Georgia State University, looked at our graduation rates. They were nothing to write home about, and decided to do something about it. And 10 years of initiative later, we have this very, this student success initiative that allows us to target the reasons why students didn't graduate in the first place. And it's important to understand that we have one of the most diverse groups of students possible. So if you look at it, we have 26% of our students are white, another third is African American, another third is other, but that includes pretty much everybody, multiracial, Hispanic, you name it, Asian. We have students from not just 159 counties in Georgia, but all 50 states and 170 countries. 67% of our students receive financial aid. 46% of them are Pell Grant recipients, which I'm trusting you know what that means, right? The national average is $23,000 of household income. That's not a lot. And 26% of our students are first-generation college students. So it's a very big, diverse group of students with the same aspiration to graduate. And so how do you help them succeed at scale? So I'm not going to bury the lead. I'm just going to give you a couple different stats that we're really proud of. We've raised our graduation rate by 22 points in the last 10 years. That's a part we're really proud of. We don't really want to know where we started, but we're really proud of 22. And it's particularly significant given the kind of population of students we're talking about and the kind of size. And the second part that we're really, really proud of is that we've eradicated the achievement gap. I think everybody's already accepted pretty much that certain populations of students are less likely to complete college, and we have the stats to show it. And what we have is that using some what I call next generation tools, we're able to have students graduate at the same rate, regardless of gender or economic background or race, which is another correlation usually. And we're extremely proud of that. So the question is, how did we do it? And I'm going to go rogue again, and I'm going to I'm going to co-present. We're going to tag team with Choi because we have a plus. Apparently, I can't speak right now. So, do you want some water? Yes, but I still would like you to. So again, this is ours, but I'm assuming you have a very. So, if you want to share a little bit about predictive analytics and. No. Okay, so one of the ways in which we do it. Okay, so one of the ways in which we do it is we actually are using a very strategic approach. Thank you so much. And so the strategic approach includes tracking over 800 unique database characteristics about every student on a daily basis to identify when they're about to get in trouble. In other words, we know they're getting in trouble before they do. And why is it significant for first-generation college students is think of it this way. If they don't know that some resources are available, if they don't know they're in trouble, and they don't know that resources are available, they certainly aren't going to reach out for it. Forget about even the imposter syndrome and all the other things. They're not going to come anywhere near it. So what becomes available is using technology and data. We're able to identify when they're going to come in trouble. And then we're able to proactively direct this information to a team of advisors who can then reach out to them and make sure that we get them back on track so they can graduate in a timely fashion. So what I love about this approach is it's high tech meets high touch. And when you have a group of students as diverse and as large as ours, it's important. So again, predictive analytics is a big part. And by the way, it's won us a lot of press, not as much as Arizona State, but a lot of press, so you'll hear the version. And we're quite proud of it. But we're also proud of the results it produces for students. And it's an approach that we take from application to graduation. And again, so why does it matter specifically for our first-gen college students? Is because, remember, if you don't have anybody in your close circle that has been to college before, who's going to walk you through the application for financial aid? Who's going to walk you through what needs to be done? And so what we found, we had a significant, what we called summer melt, which is the difference between students who apply and say they're going to come, and then they don't show up their first semester of college. And so to help them walk this, we actually have a virtual assistant. So this is Pounce, this is our mascot at Georgia State. But it's a virtual assistant. It's 24 hours. They can sort of text their questions and same for the parents and get real-time answers. And we find that it's cost-effective because, again, scale. But we also find that it corresponds really to what this generation wants. And when we tested it, we found that we have a 10% more responses from messages from first-generation college students, and actually almost 20% more from Pell Grant recipients. So clearly students who actually have economic problems or who actually have nobody to walk them through find this a very helpful tool. And again, to put them in a term, they think it's chill, which is again high praise apparently from our students. We also have a FirstGen portal, which actually puts all of the resources available on the portal, which actually, by the way, includes scholarships. So you have scholarships for first-generation college students. All right. And then, again, we try to give them, we try to give them ways to sort of mostly focus on navigating their first years. This is where it's most difficult. Okay. So back to what they said they wanted, right? Can you make it a course? Can you give us more courses? Better yet, can you make it a degree? So we actually are right now focused on 3 pillars. The first one is mainstream entrepreneurship. And by the way, this is Kenneth again, and he's wearing his product. And on his website, he has this in really super high res and invites you to blow up the picture to say, can you see that I'm wearing it? Because he identified that one of the concerns that people had is, well, I don't want to wear this plastic thing that people are going to notice. And what he's trying to say is, nobody will notice, right? But again, so this is one of our examples of mainstream entrepreneurship. We're talking about students who are trying to solve a problem that maybe they experience themselves and they think, I can solve it for me and I can solve it for many people like me. And I can do it in a way that makes money. He's extremely industrious. Again, we're talking about economic and community pillars. Now, there's a thread of innovation, right? He obviously did not create the silicon-based, the medical-grade silicon-based product that he's using, but he partnered with a retired Georgia State engineering professor in order to do this. So part of the secret sauce is also leveraging the university and the university resources in order to do what they need to be successful. So this is Kenneth. We also are very clear that our students, just as we've heard, have a commitment to contribute back to their communities. And so the way we do this is we do this with specifically a program in social entrepreneurship as a degree. We do this in partnership with the Andrew Young School of Policy Studies, which is sort of top 15 or top 20 in their field. So clearly we bring the entrepreneurship expertise and they bring all of the nonprofit management, all of the corporate social responsibility, all of the work in the public sector expertise, and all of the entire network to the table. But the idea is to understand that it's a campus without boundaries and that which make them first generation college student, which is this grit, this drive, this willingness to try, also makes them the kind of leaders that will effect change on a local, on a national, and on a global basis. I want to give them the means to do that. So that's what this program is for, literally using social innovation. And sometimes they actually do it on the campus. So we have some students who decided that one of the barriers they face, not just as low-income students, but as first-generation college students, is that suit for the interview. How do I dress professionally? And we even hear from people in HR that, well, they were good, but they didn't impress in the interview because they didn't wear that suit. And so they took it upon themselves and they decided to create a campus pantry, not just a campus pantry, but a campus closet. And then because we're in this entrepreneurship class, they decided, well, where are the other sources of revenue and how can we make it a closet in a box so that we can actually also provide the solution for perhaps other campuses and we can just help them implement it. So this is a kind of example even at a local level. So not just social entrepreneurship, but I don't know if you know this, but Atlanta, or Georgia in general, but has become sort of the go-to place for the movie industry. Right? So again, like 70-80% of Black Panther was filmed in Atlanta. We keep telling people that we live in Wakanda. But apparently we live in the Marvel universe because a lot of the blockbusters are being filmed in Atlanta. And so it's a really, really booming industry. And so we're placing that bet. Oh, and the other thing, Forbes called us the hip hop capital of the universe. I don't know what that means, but I like it. So what that means is that we understand that there is not just a drive from a student perspective and level of interest, but there's also an opportunity because the media industry contributed $10 billion to Georgia last year. And frankly, demand is outpacing supply. So we understand that we can position our students to be well-rounded in this domain, that they can not only hedge their bets and participate as employees, but also become content creators. And so some of our students, for example, one of my students is a triple endorsed singer-songwriter. And she, as a content creator, she understands that she needs to be able to manage her intellectual property. very successfully. So they actually are thinking of themselves as a business, what they create as a business. But it can also go to sort of larger media businesses, such as the one that Robert is launching, right? So again, we try to give them the tools to do this. And by the way, we also bring the industry experts to the table. Whether it's for AR, VR, we have places we have green screens where they can actually build. It's actually quite remarkable. And we actually have activated those spaces with those companies. So whether they are sort of the top video making companies or so in the building accessible, which is quite amazing. We also do a lot of community and co-curricular activities. Okay, that picture. I leave the entire semester for that moment, right? And I await not just a competition, but the moment when they find out if they won or not, because you always have this mouth hanging open and totally surprised, this unbridled joy. And it's really not about the money, because it's not that much money. I mean, it's not retirement money, right? But it's that moment when they get a sense that what they said resonated, and external investors or entrepreneurs thought that idea had merit. And so I do this so that we can create anchor experiences, so that even if that business does not continue, they remember that they can create something that has value, that resonates with people. And yes, they are praised for not the outcome, but the work, because this is actually was taken from a business model competition. So we have workshops, we have panel and guest speakers, and we also have student organizations, because to your point, you cannot underestimate the peer network, right? We give them the means to build. So we actually have a living learning community. So it's a dorm where they actually get to live. They get whiteboards, and they get special programming, and they get spaces where they can work together 24/7. We have maker labs, a few, one in the Creative Media Institute, Industry Institute, and one which is sort of a more generic, where they can build things. I'm sure in my bag I have a little coin that says "Make something awesome." It's one of the things they give to people. So we have 3D printers, and but I even have so my students oftentimes when they work on a project, they may be able to 3D print their prototype, which goes really well in competition. The ones with the prototype always wins. But we also have a student who actually makes clothing, and she actually uses the sewing machines, and she actually makes all of her clothing in the Maker Lab. So we actually want to give them the ability to do this, and it's important because again, we're changing from being a commuter campus, we're an urban university. But oftentimes our first generation college students do not have those resources at home, or they don't have the means to pay for them. So being able to have them on campus for free and available at really long hours allows them to test, right? So now they don't have to wonder if they can start their own clothing line. Maybe they can actually start something and try to have some customers get some feedback before they launch, which is pretty important. And speaking of launching, we also have a couple incubator spaces, and again, 24-hour access on a card membership, and specific programming such as the Startup Exchange, which by the way is free and a non-degree course. It's basically students delving in and going for customer discovery with their own ideas, which is very successful as well, great high ratings.
What is the Startup Exchange?
So again, it's a 10-week program, and students come in they start in with their ideas, and they're walked with a very rigorous customer discovery process. Last semester, I think we had 175 students sign up. By the end of the process, after 10 weeks, they only had about 75 left, but the 75 they had left, they had some amazing things to share. So those are the students who are not just exploring the concept of entrepreneurship, but they roll up their sleeves and they work on their own ideas, and they self-select. Yes, it's pretty well done. We also have a Center for Entrepreneurship. So I'm distinguished. I'm representing the Institute. The Institute is less than 3 years old, right? It's not actually 2 years old. The Center for Entrepreneurship predates the center by almost 20 years. So, which was actually started with a generous gift by the Russell family. Now, the center had some programming, but all those things that I shared really came from a level of institutional commitment, which came with also some of the degrees. Otherwise, as I said, our first generation college students or our students in general, student profile, find it really, really hard to participate in co-curricular activities, and so there wasn't the same sort of participation. So since I'm sneaky, part of what we do is that we embed some of those events into the course. So our Intro to Entrepreneurship course, which is titled Entrepreneurship Thinking, which is true because we really believe in building the entrepreneurship mindset. It's very sort of transparent advertising. On the other hand, it's completely misleading because the students think they're going to be thinking. And my idea of thinking looks like rolling up your sleeves and doing stuff so that you can reflect and think back on what worked, right? And so it's actually a very intense course, as they find out. And the students from that course, the students actually pair up, come up with their ventures as you shared, and at the end they actually have this competition within the class, and the best of all the different sections, and we have like 6 sections a semester, compete in a business model competition where they actually are prizes. And so again, there's a lot of thinking happening. They have to do a reflection paper on what they've learned and a learning log, but there's also a whole lot of doing. I want to give some props over my colleagues who do some really interesting things. So in the social entrepreneurship program, they have to do an internship. That's part of the program, right? And in our media entrepreneurship program, some of the courses, they actually have to create a website. They have to have a sort of visual presence, but they also have a creativity workbook that they journal, that they keep for the course. So they actually have some physical artifacts of what they created at the end of the class as well. So the Brussels Center actually provides, we have an influential speaker series. We bring a nationally known speaker at least once a year, once a semester. They fund the business model competition. They fund seed grants. So our official incubator is actually a class. Back to how do you get your first generation college students and your hardworking students, we make it a class. But everybody, you have to apply, but everybody who's accepted gets $1,000 seed funding for their idea. So you can get started with the incorporation, and the money goes to the company, which means they have to incorporate. So you have to be somewhat serious before you get there. And then the other thing is the Brussels family also have their own sort of Center for Entrepreneurship, and we're in the process of creating reciprocal partnerships. So that even after our students graduate, they have an extended home where they have their house with other sort of full-fledged entrepreneurs around the city. And that's something that we work on very actively, is creating partnerships so that we have I want to say off landing, but we have places for our students to go after they finish, even after they graduate.
So where's the center house?
Which one?
Part of the
So
center.
the center is currently the institute and the center are currently co-located, ours, and the Brussels Center is actually a few miles down the street, and it's much bigger.
The business school and stuff?
So yes, so the institute, so the center is within the institute. It's like Russian dolls. So the center is within the institute, and the institute reports into the College of Business. But very important to notice, we actually have a university-wide mandate, right? And it's very important for everybody at the university to make sure that we are making ourselves equally available to all the other disciplines. And so I think it works really well. And sometimes we do events in common. Like some of our main my Russell speaker the last one we had was actually a really prominent social entrepreneur. So we do events in common. We do it's hub and spokes model. So we do the core entrepreneurship courses, and they sort of specialize. So we share our students, if you will. And I think the model has worked very well so far. It's kind of interesting that we all have, degree programs. So there's some people who have been concerned about, well, are they coming to you or are they coming to me? And what I find is we have a tsunami of students coming. There is no lack of students for what we're trying to do. So, it's my take is the rising tide floats all boats. We have a bigger problem with capacity than we have, sort of sharing where they're going to go. And frankly, I'm delighted when I teach a little bit about social entrepreneurship and my students go, that's the thing? Yes, that's the thing. It's actually a different way which you can do entrepreneurship. And so I find that as they learn more, they orient themselves in one way or the other. So in closing, I want to make a case for entrepreneurship innovation. I know that a lot of centers are entrepreneurship centers, but I want to make a case for entrepreneurship and innovation. I think not just because they work really well, but it's because we want to optimize the present, but we want to prepare them for the future. So we came to that road as well. We had to decide, do we go after the high-tech, high-growth entrepreneurship that everybody sort of loves to see? And we had to think about, well, who are our students? And given their resources, where they are, given what they say they're interested in, that's not necessarily the main path, right? But it's also important that we expose our students to what else is available, because it might be not all of the students, but some of them might be interested in something else. But also because we realize that not each and every one of our students is going to end up being a successful entrepreneur. And even if they do, it may not be that venture. And even if it is that venture, it may not be today. And so what happens in the meantime? Well, I think it's really important that they have practical skills, that they have rich, dense networks that they can leverage, that they have skills, that they understand those frameworks around entrepreneurial thinking, but also innovative thinking, that makes them extremely sought after, even as employees. And in fact, we find a lot of our students are doing side launches. So this is Caleb. Caleb is a computer science major, but Caleb is a first-generation entrepreneur. And he's one of the co-founders of Bitcraft, which is a crypto consulting company. So he's one of 5. I know the other four are not first-generation entrepreneur, but sometimes this is how they mitigate the risks, right? Is because they team up. And so they each have jobs. Each one of them is blockchain programmers. I don't know if you know anything about that industry, but that basically means that for every single one of them, there are 14 job offers competing for them. So the opportunity cost of working for their own venture is really high. It's kind of like my cybersecurity students. It's like they can't be in one place, people are trying to steal them, and the price keeps increasing. But one of their values is they value independence. And so they have their jobs, and then they also together are creating Bitcraft. And Bitcraft was revenue positive and profitable from day one because they have customers. And they could focus on just growing Bitcraft, but they still continue to grow their skills and their network. And they're investing the money that they're making from Bitcraft into their own additional streams of revenue. So last time we talked, they were talking about arbitrage bots that they're trying to create, and they're trying to create passive source of revenue. So they're putting their technological skills and their financial resources towards growing. And in that way, they're quite impressive. And what I find is, even though they're impressive, they're not alone. Again, there's not each and every one of our students does this, but a few of them, surprisingly more than we think. And so we find that exposing students who may not have this exposure otherwise, especially our first-gen students, to things like fintech and blockchain and AR and VR, especially in those places which are booming from an economic perspective in Atlanta, is one of the ways in which we can help prepare them for the future. And I'm talking about Caleb and Bitcraft, but this is the same conversation about, again, Christian, who actually has created Coin, which again, fintech. And so I think it's really important that we make sure that we provide those skills, because again, it's possible that the demand for innovation is bigger than the demand for entrepreneurship. Because again, it's possible that the way in which they will become effective entrepreneurs is within organizations where they need to understand those different set of skills, right? Or it's possible that they will first go the route of innovation within a company before they actually branch out on their own and launch their own venture. And it's also possible that as they are working their way on their own venture, an innovation skill set make them even more attractive to employers, allowing them to navigate the ups and downs of the entrepreneurship process so that they can, on the end, sort of come back more effectively. And so I think that they start out by being amazing first-generation college students, and if we do our job well, they are well-prepared first-generation college entrepreneurs. But I think that if we equip them with some of those tools, with a very dense network, with the mentorship, then who knows, they might also be the job creators of tomorrow. Thank you.
So I want to ask the students here about, Isabelle, you came up with a different take, which so some of the entrepreneurship centers or some of the help that folks try to do, it's all co-curricular. One is because it's easier to spin up co-curricular than curricular, because as long as you're not touching the curricula, you can sort of move a little more nimbly. But what you heard Isabelle say was putting it in a classroom setting where you're getting credit for the work was one of the keys. So I just actually like each of you to respond to that and say, what, not necessarily which one you like better, but which one of those concepts would resonate? Would you rather see these kinds of activities be in a class because there's a limited amount of time, or would you rather have that work be done co-curricular or any combination in between? I have stumped them.
Yeah, that was a tough question.
Yeah.
Yay.
Did any of you get credit for things that you did on the entrepreneurial side? Or was this just...
Well, I got some credit, but I'll talk about it when it gets to
I haven't gotten any credit for anything. I'm more of the engineering, and I want to touch on it kind of on my own time. So I do have two friends who are in, I think they're in two different certain fields in the business major, and I do talk to them a lot, and we've gone over some of the stuff that they study, and I get to like help them study for it, and it's really cool. But I am more of a sustainability engineer kind of side, so I am going to start taking sustainability classes, and those will be a class that I can take alongside my classes. But it is hard. Just looking forward to my next year classes. My curriculum is going to be 6 to 7 hours in the same classroom for like a couple of I think I have 5 classes, and they're all in the same room for the same amount of time. So by the time I'm done that, I will really be tired, and I'll just not want to go to another one. So it is kind of, I prefer it not to be like something that is like I have to do. I like to reach out to do it. And I mean, I might come back and get another like minor in a more business kind of entrepreneurship centered way, but as of right now, I'm sticking to the train that I'm on, just because I've tried to do more than just what my classes have asked me to do, and I nearly changed majors. But I got back on track, and I'm doing really well. So I choose to stay on my and just go on. But here's my.
I think it's kind of like the same thing for me. Like, I just look at it as something that I want to do on my own. I want to do it to better myself and to market myself, and that's really the whole reason that I became a mentor at UNH's Makerspace, was just because, like, you know, I love learning and I love exploring my options and seeing what's out there. And I feel like if I'm in a classroom setting for all of that, it's just going to kind of like make me feel constricted and like I can't, you know, do whatever I want to do and be whoever I want to be, because there's like a curriculum that I have to follow then. And then there's ends up being some kind of rails that I have to follow, which can be a good thing, but it's also a limiting factor in that you can't go out and then focus on anything you want. And it also makes it difficult in marketing yourself because, you know, if it was a co-curricular thing and you start looking at, you know, you start trying to pick like a specific thing that you want to actually do, then you can be limiting yourself from seeing other options. So I think I would rather have it be something that like I do on my own time, whether it be for fun or for my own business, really.
Okay, so I took, my major is entrepreneurship, so I have had to take a lot of classes in that field. My project that I'm doing personally, what makes me the CEO of it is, it's called TAP, it's Teacher Pal. It's this concept that allows students to get credit for work they do outside of class. So whenever they go to study with their classmates, or we're trying to basically promote the idea that when students study with one another, they do a lot better. This is also based on research. So yes, I have gotten some credit from the work I have done out of class, and that is just to prove that this approach works. So I got a couple of professors to monitor my work out of class, and I invited them to some of the pitches that I had to give based on TAP, and they gave me credit for it. So in that aspect, I have received some credit. We are trying to push that whole peer-to-peer study environment forward because, so I had to take calculus 1 through 3, right? And I'm awful at math. I'm not the best at math, but I realized that was not exactly the case. I found it difficult, like learning from what my professor said. It's probably because their style of teaching did not really fit my learning style. So I noticed that whenever I studied with my friends, I did a lot better. Like they were able to teach me. It was a more customized learning that helped me to understand the concepts better. And that worked effectively. Through that, I decided to come up with this project, and I believe if communication is enhanced in the education system, students will be able to pass information around a lot easier, and they'll not be afraid to ask questions, making it like enjoyable for them, and they'll be able to pass your classes. Like we have tested it last semester. This semester we have Clark University actually interested in trying the concept. Tomorrow I'm talking to WPI, their head of computer science departments, about that too. And hopefully I get to talk to you guys about the project that I'm working on as well. So yes, I think it's essential to give the students the option as to whether they want it to be a part of the education system in terms of entrepreneurship, or whether they should be free to choose it or not. I love that.
So my business isn't perhaps the most, for political reasons, it's probably, so what we work on is we provide drone systems for municipal and state governments, and then provide cities, states, and private partners counter UAS strategies to protect against criminal use of drone systems or potential terror attacks involving drones. So unfortunately, not very creditable, but I've taken entrepreneurship courses just because I had to. Between practically applying it in the real world, working again at Techstars, and through running my own company for the past year, I would say that the practical implementation of my own company and working closely with startups was a lot more valuable experience than kind of taking the class and me not really caring. I didn't really feel, and this is not indicative of anything, but I didn't feel like the professor had much extra to give to me beyond what I had, and this was taken before Techstars, so my entrepreneurship courses were before. I didn't feel like they had a lot extra to add to my computer science education that would make me say, okay, I think I'm good enough to start my own business, right? It was until like developing this scrappy habit, this very, learning more about the environment and all the things associated with that. I just feel like a classroom environment getting death by PowerPointed, it's just not conducive to how entrepreneurship works, and so, yeah, I wouldn't recommend investing too much into a lot of classroom learning. I think it's a lot more of like practical based work.
So let me ask you, I just want to clarify.
So hold on just a second. Because first of all, thank you for asking this question. It's super valuable to hear this feedback. And I think, I just want to clarify, make sure that I heard what I heard before so I think I heard two things. I think one of the things that I heard is that it's important to have multiple paths or multiple points of entry, right? So for those who actually want to take credit for it because they don't want to have additional semesters already changed, that's important. And then for those who actually don't want it to be their course of study, beyond they want to study something else, it's helpful to actually have all those other resources that they can sort of put together in the way that they want. And I think in some ways is one of the things that we've sort of tried to do. But I think the other thing that I hear is that you have a different level of expectations for what you're going to be taught in an entrepreneurship class. And that it better be practical, it better be effective, you better feel like it actually was worth the time, and that it makes you better prepared. Is that or is there something else? Yeah.
So.
Because I think it turns into a design requirement in terms of how, not just if, but how we should develop those courses.
Yeah, I think it was really eye-opening to go to work in this startup environment and not really have a business background at all and just coming at this from a STEM perspective, like probably most students, not knowing a lot about business and just knowing that I'm just going to do this field and I get a job, and then maybe in the future when I'm 30, 40 years old, start my own business in that field and like start my own. It was working at at that place and seeing, there was an entrepreneur there, one of the cohorted companies, being only 23 years old, just recently graduated out of college, and getting an investment from Techstars. It was amazing and incredible to see, someone who, is super motivated, saw something that was wrong and like got it done and got into one of the most competitive business accelerators in the world, at such a young age. I think that was one of the biggest influences. But, just at the university level, I would see a lot of students who would go through difference makers and make it through a lot of things, and I would scoff and say, oh yeah, well, they're the outlier, right? They're that wonder kid that you hear about on the news who like started up some business when he was like, still wearing diapers or something like that, So to be able to say like, this is indicative of the whole, not just special cases, and that the notion that entrepreneurship is sort of like catering to these like special cases, wonder stars who, colleges like to put up all over the place inside of a university. It's for the general population, not just for these people that the university tries to push so that they can increase like admissions numbers, so.
Can I ask one clarifying question, though? Can you just go over your majors before you answer? So you're computer science. You are?
Marketing and entrepreneurship.
Okay.
I'm chemical engineering.
Mechanical engineering.
Okay. So the one thing I just want to tweeze out, right, is everybody's not the same. The 3 engineers said, I want to do it on my own, and the non-engineer said, it's great to get credit. Right? And so it's important to, because one of the issues with engineering curricula is that you don't have time for that extra course, and that if you take that extra course, you overflow, and you might have to take a 5th year, and all of you are desperately trying to avoid another year of student debt. And so the answers to these questions are, there's a lot, no one student looks the same. So I just wanted, I was gonna guess you were business or marketing, and that everybody else was an engineer based on the way you responded to that question. It doesn't mean each response is not valid in and of itself, but it's just for this group to think about that because the answer is based on where you came from, not just what your current experience is.
So by the way, may I add, so the other thing though is that entrepreneurship is not just business, as everybody knows, right? Yeah. So there's design thinking, there's organizational design, there's, so much of entrepreneurship and managing your startup is actually about managing people. It's about how to hire and fire and identify talent and how to manage things like building an organization, again, which is not all about business. So at ASU, one of the things that we've had to do is for the curricular and co-curricular, for the curricular in particular, find ways to make it relevant for engineering students. And so there's significant entrepreneurship courses in the engineering curriculum for credit, as there are for the business school students, as there are for the Herberger Institute for Design and the Arts, as there are for College of Nursing and Health Innovation. And so the idea is to really make it relevant for your business, for your majors, and not just for business. Mm-hmm. And in the case of ASU, there's 134 different academic courses that are completely all over the university. And that's actually one of my challenges, to try to figure out where is everything, because it's not just housed in the School of Business.
Yeah. And actually, so I'll take one question, and then because we're both running out of time and still have one person to go, so.
I'm new in my role in our School of Innovation, and so one of the things I was done was sent out to visit other schools, and I'm going to be coming to visit some of you after hearing your presentation. But one of the things I heard is, any death by PowerPoint is bad teaching, no matter what the subject is, yep. Right? And so, if we're going to do it curricularly, you have to do it well. And I think your multiple points of entry thing is exactly right. Utah has an amazing entrepreneurship program, which is entirely co-curricular because they just didn't want to mess with the faculty. And I think that's when we spoke to this. Well, that's the reason they gave. They said we're just we don't want to go talk to those people, so we're just going to do this. And the problem was when we talked to the students, we said, well, how does this connect with your curriculum? And they're like, oh, well, you got to go to class, but we try to do that as little as possible because I want to do my thing. And I think they're missing a really important way to sort of scaffold some of the important skills they need as entrepreneurs they could be getting if the courses were taught properly. Yeah. Which means maybe not a 3-credit 1-semester course. Maybe it's lots of different.
Yeah, I'd follow up with that by saying for a lot of the group work, I've run into this, especially at the entrepreneurship, between working with engineers and then business students. I've had a lot of times where it's I did all the work, and then everyone else, is kind of just coasting through the class as well. So it's kind of that, if I was the head of this group, I probably would have fired you a long time ago. But because you're in the class, I have to keep carrying you along. So it's it's sort of that the classroom environment. It feels artificial by its nature, right? And I know it's difficult because obviously universities, you have to connect it somehow. But in working outside, in terms of making it some sort of directed study or some sort of co-op class, I feel like that in making it seem realistic as possible, as opposed to some sort of manufactured environment, would probably be a lot more useful. That's my opinion.
A lot depends on the size of your institution too. We don't have a business school at a small private liberal arts college, and our faculty don't let us mess with their curriculum at all, very much like Oberlin. There's a little bit of separation of church and state, and so we use winter term to offer short-term classes. But one challenge always is how do you build credibility? None of our faculty have the credibility to offer the kind of curriculum we really envision. So we bring in alumni, but they don't have the pedagogical skills. So I'm I've had to balance 2 alumni who are founders, and they're signing term sheet in Korea, and they have to leave for a week, and I'm holding the bag, trying to keep the course online. So one of the challenges is how to offer that credible curriculum, that works for your institution, creating meaningful experiences for students who are immersed and want to do something immersive. you know.
So one of the things I'll touch on is community-based partnerships, because it's exactly one of. So this was not by design, where I'm actually last. This was just I didn't know I was going to be last today, but this is really easy. So I'm from Arizona State University, and I'm here to talk a little bit about our first generation programs for in entrepreneurship. We have none. That's easy. So thanks very much. I'm done. And no, but by the way, it is true. We actually don't have any specific entrepreneurship programs for our first generation students. And the reason why we don't is because we built in as an underlying assumption into our student population base that there are going to be issues that are relevant, not just for first generation students, but for low income students, for students from underrepresented minority groups, from historically excluded groups. And because of that, we actually have, and so I'll cut to the chase. And again, this was completely by accident. I have 2 slides and we're done. No, I'm kidding. I actually have a lot of other slides as well. Lessons learned, the overall ecosystem matters, not just within the university. So in our case, Isabelle, we're sold. We actually call it Entrepreneurship Plus Innovation. So it benefits from the institutional priority in supporting first generation students. What it does is it gives me the opportunity to fully model best practices that are being implemented across the university anyway. And so instead of calling out and saying, here are our special programs for first generation students and here are our special programs for historically excluded students, what we do is we say, let's build into the assumption that the students who we serve are going to have some of these characteristics and are going to have some of these challenges, regardless of whether you can identify them as white and poorer or as Hispanic and richer. It doesn't matter. For us, it became, this is the population we're working with. And I'll give you a little bit of background on that in a minute. The shared support services model, this is lesson number 2 for us. The idea that we work with university partners. There's nothing that we do that's outside of the academic units or even outside of the student support units in many ways. As an example, and I've called out a few examples just to give you, our educational outreach and student services division are the ones that run all of our first year success programs, the peer tutoring programs, the counseling programs, this and that. We don't do anything separate from them. We actually paraglide in with them. So everything that they're working on, all we do is we infuse entrepreneurship inside of their resources, inside of their models entirely. Finally, community-based partners. So the idea that we work with community partners inside of Greater Phoenix, and again, this specificity matters. ASU is one of 3 state institutions in the state of Arizona. We work in Greater Phoenix, which has a population of 4.5 million people. The university itself serves 103,000 students in a single administration. Of those 103,000 students, 70,000 of those students are on 5 of our metropolitan campuses, 33,000 students are fully online. So even for things like our online students, many of whom are first generation as well, how do we start to reach them? How do we serve them when we're not in place with them necessarily? So we do a lot of community partnership work. And again, let's start with the idea. ASU's charter begins with the idea that we measure ourselves by who we include. Not who we exclude, but who we include and how they succeed, and it's all of it, right? So we're benefited and buoyed by the fact that we have this overall immediate upfront principle, including the idea that we assume fundamental responsibility for the cultural outcomes, the health outcomes, the economic outcomes. And so my unit, which is not even an institute, it's not even a center, it's a thing that the entire university supports. We have about a 30-person staff, about a $10 million operating budget. Again, scale matters, right? We're serving 103,000 students in addition to the greater community. The economic impact that we have is part and parcel of who we are as an institution. So just very briefly, you'll see in the last 15 years since President Crow's been the president of Arizona State University, the number of first generation students we serve has increased dramatically. The number of undergraduate applications, 35%. Our total population of students that are first gen are 30%. Of that 30% of women, 43% of our first gen students are historically excluded or underrepresented minority. The top schools and majors, we have 18 different colleges, of which, just to give you a sense of scale, our engineering school serves 20,000 students. Our business school serves 15,000 students. So you can imagine here we have this kind of scale and reach, but our teachers' college, for example, were actually, oh, by the way, just as a quick note on Georgia State, the reason why Isabelle and I kept doing some side conversations is we're both part of something called University Innovation Alliance. It's 11 public research universities in the country that work together, and that work together to improve academic outcomes, to improve 4-year graduation rates, 6-year graduation rates, et cetera. So I knew quite a lot about Georgia State already, including your vice provost, Tim Rennick, has been receiving awards at ASU. And there's a new documentary coming out. It's called Unlikely. And it's a documentary about addressing the college dropout crisis, of which there's a high correlation for first generation students for many reasons. Georgia State is one of the institutions that's highlighted in terms of their practices. So, we're dealing with an incredibly diverse population of students, right? Some number of who are 18 to 22-year-olds, some number of who are 27-year-olds, some number of who are returning to school, incredibly diverse population. So here too, if you look at just diversity in terms of economics, look at the left-hand side of the chart. In terms of who we're serving, we've gone from serving in the fall of 2002 less than 400 students in the lowest income ranges to now, look at that number. So we're serving actually some of the most socioeconomically disadvantaged students in the country, let alone the state. And that is some of the things we want to talk about when we talk about things like risk aversity, and we're seeing that it's very hard to generalize many different things, but what we try to do is bring out characteristics of our student population and find ways to proactively serve them. Let me just give you a sampling of things that we do at ASU wide for FirstGen. There's a lot of things we do that other people have talked about too. The peer-to-peer, the first-year Student Success Center, the kind of modeling. But very specifically, we work on Access ASU. It's a pipeline program where we actually work in the high schools in Greater Phoenix about college readiness and college bound. And then we also work with community-based organizations, many different types of community-based organizations, so that college going just becomes a thing, and it's part of what we do as a university as far as our overall outreach goals. And then we work with all of the Maricopa Community Colleges districts, community colleges, of which I think the total number served is something like 250,000 students in just the Maricopa Community College district. So we have pipeline programs automatically. There's articulation programs with all of them. In addition to, and again, we've learned from the university. So one of our most successful programs this year has been an entrepreneurship program where we have entrepreneurship resources at ASU that we then leverage with 10 of the community colleges as part of the Maricopa Community Colleges district. In addition, some of our best programs are national youth entrepreneurship programs. So we run high school entrepreneurship programs, and this year we've actually moved into the middle schools program. We do this all with corporate funding, by the way. So we go into the CSR budgets, we do lots of fundraising. So Verizon Foundation and Cisco Foundation are two of our biggest backers. So the way we support first-gen students is actually reaching into the middle schools at that point and having college going, coupled with entrepreneurship, design thinking, be part of their experience. And so coming into college with the idea that I'm a first-gen student and I know about entrepreneurship and I know about design thinking and I know about business model canvas and lean startup and all that other stuff is just part of the pathway to college for them. Just quickly, adaptive and interactive learning. Again, this is another university thing. We talked about predictive analytics. We actually spent an incredible amount of time looking at predictive analytics in terms of what are the obstacles for students completing, what's contributing to dropout rates. Surprisingly or unsurprisingly, a lot of it actually doesn't have to do with finances. A lot of it doesn't have to do with even some of the things that people assumed. So one of the things we found is we took 11 of the first year kind of type courses and where students were finding some of the most challenges. We redesigned the entire first year curriculum around general education. And it was very much with the idea that we have to do better. It's not that these students are underprepared, it's that we have to do better to reach them so that they are able to succeed. I have a detailed chart on this in just one moment. Faculty and staff modeling, a bunch of us were talking about the idea of, how many of us are first generation? I'm first generation. I actually was a college dropout for about a year, and then I went back and went to work and completed schools and career at Columbia University, New York University, United Nations, a bunch of other things. So in our university overall, President Crow is a first college generation, right? So he's first college himself. The entire staff, university council, deans, provosts, everybody is encouraged to talk about their experience. And it's part of our orientation for our students. Everyone is encouraged to talk about their experience. So this is part of, again, faculty and staff modeling. Parents and guardian support. Here too, it's not just about things like how to talk to your kids about school, but also how to have them become resources in the community. So we actually have a number of programs, including like the American Dream Academy, which is specifically targeted to parents and guardians about how they help their students through the college process, applications process, how do they become resources, how do they start to talk about, again, college going as a specific type of work. So we took all of this and we actually built in all of this into our entrepreneurship program. So as an example, in our middle school's youth entrepreneurship program, while we're working with middle school students and we're working with teacher training, we actually have cafecitos. We actually have programs where we bring parents in and we ask the parents to come and learn about the curriculum that their students are learning about. And we engage parents into entrepreneurship and into design thinking, again, all of our curriculum, and we find opportunities to specifically bring parents in based on the idea that this is what we know works for first generation students anyway, so why don't we use those same types of practices? Just to give you one other piece of data point here, these courses, and there were 11 of them, this is just a sampling of some of them that we did: psychology, economics, biology, history, college algebra. And what we did is we changed everything from the way that the classrooms are designed, to the way that students are learning, to the way that everything is now changed into project-based modules. ProMods is, I think, what a lot of people have heard about, and really looked at the impact of pass rates, which is C and better, and then B or better. So by changing from just a lecture style type things, and again, engaging the faculty, engaging department chairs, using predictive analytics, understanding where students are falling down, moving from a summative basis of learning outcomes to using a more overall holistic way of looking at outcomes, we changed the way we do general education. And so it's helpful for me because as a university, we're saying this is what we're willing to do. We're willing to actually turn around our curriculum upside down. So when we look at things like, oh, should we do more courses in entrepreneurship? Should they be for credit? Should they be not for credit? The answer is yes, and both, whatever. And so we could do everything from boot camps to short courses to, we have an entrepreneurship major. I mentioned we have 130 some odd academic courses in entrepreneurship because there's already that license and freedom to experiment with lots of things, including we have something called Online Startup School. It's something we created a while ago to say, oh, how do we reach the students online? We work with our online division, and we're now a channel on our what's called the Pitch platform, which is the student success platform for students that are online. Entrepreneurship is a channel on there where they could talk about entrepreneurship and resources and what's available to them. In our career and professional development services, as an example, we have entrepreneurship as a specific track. How do we help students get placed into interns? How do we hire students as interns and then place them into startup companies so that they get that experience and they're not brokering that on their own on a one-to-one basis? So the idea is really trying to, I think, meet lots of the questions around how do I do both school and work and access kind of flexible time and all kinds of other things. So the answer is at ASU we tried a bunch of stuff, right? And around the idea of entrepreneurial mindset, it's not that we're driving people towards starting ventures, it's that we're driving people towards understanding, creating value, understanding what it means to explore your curiosity. And so I've got a great platform to work on because, again, we're not just counting the number of startups and the number of widgets that were created, we're counting all kinds of other things, including how many people join teams. And again, at ASU, scale matters, so we have resources. I'm going to fly through some of this stuff. We have resources that really allow us, 130 I mentioned, student outreach community programs. The community programs, by the way, the part that's helpful for that is we've engaged more than 60 venture mentors, and a fraction of them are our alumni. Unfortunately, ASU has a history where our alumni has not been largely connected to the university. It doesn't help that we had a graduation rate of something like 20-something% and 20 years ago versus where we are now, beating national averages, right? But the startup entrepreneurs in the community are very interested in the idea of coming back to work. And sometimes it means a little bit of coaching, right? A little bit of kind of what's appropriate in terms of working with students and in terms of pedagogy, giving them some outlines. It's much easier to teach them that than it is to teach a faculty member how to be entrepreneurial suddenly, or how to talk about a venture that they've never started. And in my case, I'm also, I was a sixth person to join my first startup, helped take that public, but I was a number 6 person, so I went in kind of like, okay, I'll be the 6th employee hired. 2 years later, we went public, and that was a very valuable skill. And even to this day, I'm able to leverage that. Later on, I went on to become number 1, right? The first person that started up a different organization. Then later on, I became to number 2 in addition to. So I've had a career which is a lot like what we try to talk to our students about, which is you can be both inside large organizations, inside small organizations. You can take all of these things and basically be able to, leverage it across all types of careers, roles, because it's all about being able to be flexible and adaptive and be entrepreneurial about the way that you're thinking about these things. So we have a whole bunch of stuff, the academic courses, the events, the symposium, the spaces. We have a funding network. I was mentioning before, we give out about $1 million worth of funding per year. And that's hard-earned money that we've brought in from endowments, and it's nice when we have endowments. We're about to announce a second endowed gift for our entrepreneurship programs before the end of this month. It's nice because I get to say in perpetuity, we have a source of operating income now that gets thrown off and we get to support this. But to the point of, yes, many of our students, whether they're first generation or whether they're from that lower, 50% of our students come from significant disadvantage. For those students, that's absolutely right. Friends and family is not something that they're going to look to for first money. So for us, those kinds of grants and gifts are incredibly important. And again, community partners come in the form of mentors, they come in the form of instructors, they come in the form of, we want to have a $10,000 scholarship for a student today. So we run the entire gamut of all of it. It helps that we have scale, and it helps that we have a significant mouthpiece in the president, in the institution overall that supports entrepreneurship. But it doesn't mean that it's easy. We still, student by student are looking to serve them. At the same time, there are times when we fully recognize that you need to have cohort-based teaching and learning that speaks to particular populations, right? The intersectionality of population is critical for all of our students. Sometimes you identify as a woman entrepreneur. Sometimes you identify as a black woman entrepreneur. Sometimes you just identify as a black person. Sometimes you identify as a person who comes from lower means of family income. So as an example, we launched one of our nation's first incubators that's designed for Native entrepreneurs. It's just something we know that Native entrepreneurs, and at the university, we graduate more Native American students than, as an example, the entire University of California system combined, even though the population is far greater in the state of California. But again, that's a commitment to inclusion. One of the things that we do know, as an example, is in the Native American population, there's a lot of emphasis on tribes-based, it's enterprise, right? It's tribes, it's enterprise. The individualism of entrepreneurship is discouraged. It's seen as kind of selfish. Why would you not want to give back to your community? So working with the American Indian Policy Institute, we actually created an incubator that was a pilot. It was a faculty member who said, this is what we know, this is what we're learning. And we said, sure, why don't we incubate an incubator? And that's literally how it started. A couple of $1,000s, we got some space, we put together a cohort, we said we're gonna get some curriculum, we're gonna work with the Center for Indian American Education, we're gonna work with the Native American. And we said, let's just incubate an incubator. And that's where I think we're often helped, is by the idea that we'll just try a bunch of stuff. Now, oftentimes trying a bunch of stuff is actually very little money. It's a lot of marketing, right? Sometimes it's social marketing. You put a brand behind something, you slap up a logo, and then you say 30 people showed up, and now we're going to keep trying to work on something. That's how, by the way, PREPT started. PREPT is a program. It's one of our most successful community entrepreneurship programs. And this is one of the things that we're looking at. It's not just modeling in the student body, but it's also modeling in families and in the community. So in our case, we often find that necessity entrepreneurs are they're hustling all the time. They just don't look like pitching in front of Silicon Valley. They just don't look the same as far as networking and passing out business cards. They do look very much like informal networks of passing along. How do you get business leads? How do you figure out how to hack a system? What's the best way to get the food permit done? What's the best way to get the licensing? So we created this program that was a mobile food entrepreneurship program because we saw that there was a lot of informal things happening, and we wanted to be able to support this, especially for lower income entrepreneurs. And the idea was, food businesses are lower, they're less capital intensive. So we find necessity entrepreneurs doing things like starting catering businesses, starting taquerias, right? And so we created that, and the idea was not only to help with very specific interventions, but also to do things like, and this is a very tangible thing, how do we help these entrepreneurs tap into procurement systems? So as an example, I'm sure all of you do this. Your universities, you buy food, right? You have receptions, you have this, you have that. We actually did food showcases for all the event managers across the university. We brought in Aramark, we brought in our procurement team, we brought in our purchasing team, and we had as many entrepreneurs as we can get them into the preferred vendor system now. So now we have preferred vendors that are started from our entrepreneurship system. So we look at it from a soup to nuts kind of real system perspective. Trying to think of, I mentioned youth entrepreneurship. Again, this is our commitment to FirstGen. We're working with Title I schools in not only central Arizona, but also in nationally, and doing this as models so that we could stand them up and say these are things that we're doing. Spaces Network, again, physical things. We have maker spaces, we have incubator spaces, we have 24/7 spaces, we have change maker spaces across all of our campuses. Ecosystem partners, right? We're out there hustling ourselves. Who's the one that said think of your startup as as a startup? So we did a bunch of things, and if I'm the CEO of a startup, I'm trying to raise money, I'm trying to bring in talented people, and I'm hustling to figure out ways to bring in additional resources and stretch. Even though it's a $10 million budget, we're still stretching that because those are largely grant funded, significantly grant funded. So we're constantly finding ways to do different things. But just one small point on this. One of the things we did do is have a very concerted strategy to go after some legitimizing sources of funding. What do I mean by that, right? So ASU, #1 in innovation 3 years in a row. Lots of people who like to say, I don't know, you can't be that big and excellent. That's really not possible. We point to our $500 million research budget. We try to do all kinds of things to say, actually, it is possible. You can have both participatory metrics and excellence metrics. It drives me crazy when people say oh, you just need to, if you want diversity and inclusion, you just have to lower your standards for a little while. I know, right? It just drives me crazy because it's that's just not true. You can have both. You can have both participation and have excellence of the highest quality. So one of the things we did is we were very deliberate about some of our sources of funding. And we decided to go after, to your point about how do you legitimize this? Well, the U.S. Economic Development Administration is willing to give me $500,000 to bet that some of our programs are worth it. You know, the National Science Foundation is willing to bet that our I-Corps site is going to have a significant impact on our commercialization strategy for the country. Having the Kaufman Foundation work with us is right? So those were 3 very specific legitimizing things that we needed to do, because even the faculty could not turn their nose up at the idea that, well, but the NSF thinks this is a good program. Mm-hmm. You know, and again, we for years, we had programs that weren't stamped, didn't have the housekeeping seal of approval by the NSF. Once we got it, I guarantee you, there was a little bit more of the engineering that was actually significant, you know, significant part of our startup pipeline. Faculty started saying, well, you're gonna give me money to do this anyway? Okay, we'll do it. So these were very deliberate strategies that we chose to pick 1 or 2 or 3 legitimizing things in addition to, at the same time, we're experimenting and building a bunch of stuff. So I don't know if that's helpful, but
Yeah, I think what I'd like to do, given that you can hear that we're over time, we started a little late too, to let people kind of, it's like every schedule, you start late and then everyone wants you to end on time, but that's the way things work. Is I'd like just for, if you could give me 5 more minutes, I'd actually like the students, you're surrounded by people who desperately want to help, who make assumptions about what we think you need, or we're trying to figure out this FirstGen concept, and we have lots of different ways to do it. But even what you heard was some of us have identified this as an issue that we know is important, but we don't really have the data behind it to say what works and what doesn't work. So if you would just share with us 1 or 2 things that you think, so instead of us talking at you, 1 or 2 things that you each think your university could do, or all universities could do, to help folks that look like you, or had your background, or had your experience levels, to make your lives easier, or to have this concept of innovation and entrepreneurship more steeped into what you do. Because that's the problem we're trying to crack, is how do we make sure that folks who are FirstGen students are not disadvantaged when entering a university where everyone else seems like they know what they're doing, and you don't know that they don't know what they're doing either. So any thoughts that you've got on that?
I guess I'll start.
Yeah, you got the mic, so you get to start.
So interestingly, I think all of you touched on key things that I'm working on currently, and it kind of makes me feel like I'm on the right track. The first thing you mentioned was the peer-to-peer thing, which I had also implemented on. It's like, I believe it's a very important aspect of education that is not focused on. You know, like, the education system is not like really focusing on how students are going to be engaged with one another to help in their success. And thankfully, I'm working on that, and I have spoken to a couple of universities that are really interested in like finding a solution to that problem where students are not interacting with one another. Since you're all working on it, it makes me believe that we're really heading towards the right path, and that unison is going to come together, and we'll be able to like pull the best solution. So another aspect is communication. If communication is better, we'll all be able to attain success. We'll all have one mind and be able to get a better understanding. A lot of students, I for one, when I first started school, I was a computer science major. For the first 2 years, it was through Difference Maker that I got to speak with one of the mentors who was like, okay, so based on the kind of things that you're doing, I think you're better off as a business major. I thought most of my ideas were mobile app based, right? And I thought the best way to go through execution was to be a computer science major. However, I never like thought of the aspect of being the business mind of it and recruiting people to handle the technical aspect of the business. Thankfully, I got to speak with that Difference Maker mentor who showed me the right path to work on. I believe there are other students in my field. There are other students like me who like resonate in my lack back in the day, and if we had like the right training, the right communication for this message to reach them, they'll be able to make the right decision and not end up wasting 2 years of their time like I ended up with. I mean, I wouldn't say it was wasted, but I would rather be graduated and working towards the ideas that I have. So hopefully with the right communication tools out there, students would not go through what I had to go through.
I think mostly for me, it comes down to marketing of resources at universities, because until the beginning of last year, I knew the East Center at UNH existed. I just didn't know where it was. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know where to even find it, really, to tell the truth. So most of entrepreneurship comes down to marketing, and I think that marketing, the centers that we have and the resources that we have will be a lot more conducive to students. There are a lot of things that I've done at UNH that I've gone to because I saw a sign that said free pizza. So any kind of little marketing tip, any kind of marketing thing that you can do, it helps, just get the name out there. Make it so that way it's not like an offhand thing. There are a lot of students that I talk to that say, oh, I'm a mentor at the Makerspace. And they go, oh, what's that? Where's that? I don't know what that is. And then I'm late because I have to explain what it is. And the other thing would be getting in actual entrepreneurs and have them talk to students at, some kind of a marketing event. Have them come in, have them talk about what their business is, how they started it, where they got the idea, what they saw, what they think, stuff like that, and just bring in, it could be local people, it could be huge conglomerates that come in and talk about how they became what they are. So I think doing those two things would definitely benefit students a lot more, knowing where it is and what it is and knowing how to do it.
Yeah, so from what it sounds like, to me, it sounds like a business opportunity here. It sounds like we could build a business out of helping universities build an entrepreneurship program and some form of business accelerator. I think students don't want to do something if there's no purpose to it. And it's not what the educator believes the perceived purpose is. It's that the student believes that there's a value. It's like your parents. They may dictate on you something that you think is pretty important, but if you don't see that it's important, you're immediately going to rebel or not care about it or not put in the right effort. So it's really a matter of making it as immersive and as strong as possible. I think just building a formal business accelerator, this one focused kind of class over the summer or some sort of thing where all of the students' focus and energy is not on all these different classes, but are just on the singular business idea and kind of just what they would do if they had graduated, and just pouring in as much sweat, blood, and tears into this project as possible. I think that's sort of really something that should be supported in universities.
I'm gonna go off of that. I think as a personal experience, my freshman year being in a field that my family isn't really comfortable in, because no one could tell me how my engineering classes were going to be, no one could tell me anything like that. I was overwhelmed. I couldn't decide what I wanted to do. I had so many people in my dorm telling me, oh, do this, and I was pulled so many different directions that I was losing time for me. I was trying to figure out what to do. So my advice, the two things would be, don't overdo it, because if you overdo it, then they miss the opportunity and they don't do what they want. I ended up luckily meeting a girl in my major a year higher than me who told me to do innovations, and that's when I dropped 6 clubs and I did that instead, and that's how I got in all of this, and I regret nothing. It was the best decision of my life. But if I didn't meet that one person to tell me, hey, don't do this to yourself, I would still be lost. I'd be in 6 clubs trying to do what I think an engineer needs to do instead of what I want to do. So if you do have the sign saying, oh, free pizza, a free shirt, you'll bring in people, but you might get brought to the wrong thing and then feel trapped there, which is rough.
So I'm going to ask one final follow-up question, and this is, trust me, it's going to sound like a silly question, but I mean it very genuinely. How the hell do we communicate with y'all? Because you ignore emails, texts at work, no one uses Facebook because now apparently it's for the old people. So I mean that genuinely, is all of us struggle with, you say, well, I don't know, and communicate with me, and I assure you that we are communicating with you exhaustively and are not getting the response that we would expect. So if there's one thing we could leave with, is how on earth do we get through the noise and the mess and all of the communications you get so that you hear what we hopefully are saying, now you have to trust me, assume that we're all trying to do a good job and we're communicating like hell, but assuming that that's true, how do we get through your noise of your life to get you to say, oh, that person's speaking to me, not bloop, delete, or put a filter that anything says at unh.edu so you don't see any of it. See, somebody laughs because somebody always does it. They're like, see? So seriously, so give us a tip, and then we can close out.
I think my advice would, don't make it too formal. How you portray the email. Like my friends and I, when we send emails to each other, we're not like straight to the point about what the email's about. We always do something like catchy or cool as like the opening. Most of them are just really funny, have nothing to do with what we're talking about. But like if you send an email that says, or it shows on our end, oh, from the dean of the school, you're like, everyone got it. Like the dean isn't looking at just you. It doesn't make you feel like special. It's like on campus we have an organization that like met me when I was a freshman, and they want me to do all this like political stuff, and I feel so bad that I don't answer them because they just keep emailing me. And I'm like, you don't feel special because it just says their organization or the name. If you put a subject that is just like how can we, like, have you put you in it, if you put like some way that makes them feel like especially like singled out, they'll look at the email. It's like when you get your grades back. If you see that that's person you're thinking about, like your professor, you're like, oh, grades are in, and you like look at that email like immediately. Or if your friend messages you, it's funny, so you know it's your friend. But if it's like a bill coming and you know it's DCU sending me my loan, you're gonna be like, I can look at it tomorrow, or oh, I'll do it later. But if it's something that like just makes you feel like special and not like you have to do it, you have the option to do it, because if the dean sends out a message saying something happened on campus, no one really looks at it. They glance over because they're like, maybe it's something. But if you put something that's like you put the name of the event or something that pops up bigger than the name of who sent it, I would read it, personally.
Yeah, I think there's kind of some major area. So one of it is to use your students to speak for you. You know, there's a lot of times where if someone whom I've never heard of, nor seen, nor assume probably, you know, even potentially care, right? You know, just from that perceived notion, right? You know, having students whom walk through my shoes in the same area, are accessible, you know, that like can be my friend and kind of coach me through this as well. Use your students who have gone through the program to kind of be your standard bearer. Help them drive recruitment. They know your student body better than you ever will, right? And so they can help drive recruitment in that way. Other areas would, you know, use faculty to kind of look at students whom, you know, might be interested in this area. You know, have your faculty say, that was one of my best students, a student that you know, was a really high caliber student. And maybe, you know, I've talked with one of my professors. We've done 2 directed studies on different business venture ideas. We've just done studies, wrote a paper. It ended up being a paper and not an actual business. But, you know, we just went down multiple ideas just through conversations and office hours. And we built a business idea that could very well be pushed through an entrepreneurship idea, through an entrepreneurship program, sorry. So that's, you know, those are some ways on the recruitment side. Other things is just the entrepreneurship in residence, I think, is extremely powerful. Having some form of visibility on your campus that your program not only just created something real, but that they can kind of see it and experience it. Now, I'm not saying some sort of like zoo animal, you put them in an exhibit and then show them off, but like, you know, some sort of office hours by this entrepreneur. Their office is on campus and students can come and visit and talk to them like, you know, real people in a way.
I think for me, it's like kind of what Michelle said, it's personality. It's kind of like, it's getting to someone and making it seem like it's all about them and making it seem like, you know, they're targeting you. And, you know,
I wouldn't use Target.
I can't think of a synonym. Anyway, one of the coolest posters I ever saw on campus was advertising for like a board game club or something like that. And it said, don't like board games, neither does half the club. Like, it doesn't need to be, it doesn't need to drive home a point. It needs to grab attention. If it grabs attention, then people are going to say, hey, I want to like look into that. I think the same thing with the makerspace. I didn't really know much about it when I signed up. And then when I got there, they're like, oh yeah, we have a laser cutter. And I was like, wait, you have something that can cut stuff with lasers? Whoa, hold on. I want to play with this right now. So that gets people in. And I tell all my friends, like, oh, there's like a laser cutter and there's a CNC machine. And they're like, laser cutter sounds pretty cool. I want to use that. So basically, try and make it think about how it would be if you were looking at it. Would you want to look at something that was like, oh, expand your mind, go, like, do you really want to do that? Or do you want to go, or do you want to, do you want to play with lasers? Like, personally, I want to play with lasers. Expanding your mind's fun, but I don't get to play with lasers that often. And so I think that just making it like a fun, don't make it seem like it's all work, because it really isn't all work. You have to have some fun with it. There has to be some kind of aspect of it that you're going to get to enjoy out of it, because if it's all work, no one's going to want to do it.
So to sum it all up, I think there's a lot of noise out there, and the only way you can get heard is by joining the noise making. Just the same way you got our attention by making us clap. I think to get the students' attention, you have to do what they're doing. Somewhat, it sounds like I'm just marketing. Yeah, sounds like I'm marketing myself, but then again, I'm working on that, on the tap function, which allows for people to engage with one another. Trust me, it's not only the faculty that is not getting to the students, they're not even communicating with themselves. The students are not doing that, right? And it's one of the key things that is really going to help for information to pass around if we can break that ice barrier, like that, if we can cross that level. I think with the right platform, which is what TAP is creating, it's a mobile app-based social platform. The students are constantly on their phones, like they're playing on social media. We need to create something for them that separates the traditional social platform. So not Facebook, because it's still going to be distractive. Something that is like focused on their immediate classroom. So if they're taking a calculus class, everybody in their calculus class is automatically populated for them, and they can easily communicate with one another without like the fear of being shut down or whatever it is, So something that is not going to be overly invasive, but then interactive enough for them to be engaged in whatever message you're passing around.
Bernard, do you happen to have a contract with you for UNH to sign?
We are gonna talk. We are gonna talk.
I was about to say, he's a really good salesman.
Well, we went super late, but I apologize for that. So thank you, everybody, for being part of the discussion. Hopefully you picked up a little something or other. I'm sure, I don't know who's got to run home for traffic or who's staying for the rest of the time, but feel free to grab folks. I guess that's it. So hopefully this was useful for you. Thank you.